This is a tale of humans who refuse to bow to terrifying, unfair threats. Like when, in a bright sunlit field, a heavily armored warrior wades through the wreckage, blasting away his foes and sending tiny green-skinned creatures flying with brutal, unstoppable power. Not a single one of them is alone in this future battle. There's a magina-haired sorceress, two blonde-haired elves, and a young squire standing right beside him. But this story isn't theirs. It's his. A few days before it all kicks off, in a cramped, pitch-black space, a hulking monster in jagged white armor snaps awake, then pounds its heavy, segmented fists together with a thunderous thud. Gloom crashes down on him as a terrifying thought rips through his mind. He's a monster now, trapped in a brand-new form that still has no name, though he clings to the memory of who he used to be. Who knows? His mind whips back to the days when he was just a normal human, shocked at how he became a monster who couldn't even get words out, until he remembers a bespectacled scientist pitching a gene-enhancing program and swearing it would fill up soon. He whips his gaze to the console nearby, and the display hits like a slap. 1872, the Northern Empire. Every detail has to be dead on, because figuring out what's happening to him depends on the machine's accuracy. He remembers being part of that experiment at 18, back in 1648, staring at a busted, crumbling lab and its rows of cryogenic capsules, until a sickening truth hits him. He's been asleep for 200 years. Then his eyes lock onto a nearby capsule lying in pieces. Inside sits the dried-out corpse of another test subject, a brutal warning of what happened to at least one of them. He slammed back to the console, heart pounding. If the machine's words were real, then why had it left him alone for 2 whole centuries? And what happened to the Floridic Empire in all that time? He's not even missing thoughts. He's done spiraling without proof, and as he stares at the door ahead, fresh resolve ignites in him. Time to take the first step out of this ruined lab. He shoved the door to figure out what was going on outside, hard, like he meant to force answers. The door stayed shut, so he stopped cold, then spotted a single matchstick amid the wreckage on the floor, and it finally hit him. This place was crawling with corpses. Mace kept moving, but a bead of sweat crawled down his armored brow. This was about to get nasty. He proved his gut feeling at the sealed gate. No power in the whole facility, and that door just wouldn't budge. He stared at his new body, a hulking, muscular monster, and knew this had to be a strength test, no tricks. Then he roared and smashed a brutal punch into the metal gate, the impact shaking everything, but the door didn't budge, and pain ripped straight through his knuckles. He skidded across the floor, gripping his hurt hand, but still flashed a thumbs up, pain and all, swearing he wouldn't fail his homeland silently. Then his eyes snapped to the nearest skeleton, and the truth hit like a wave. If he couldn't escape through this route, the only way forward was to plunge deeper into the underground facilities. Desperation hit like a punch, driving him to fight for his life. He refused to die here, trapped in a monster's body, so he shoved his fingers into the door seam and ripped it open with everything he had. Suddenly, the pressure evaporated and a weird calm washed over him, so he froze in place, stared at his hands and chest, and couldn't believe it. After all that brutal force, his armored body was spotless, not a scratch anywhere. His eyes snapped from the unbreakable gate to the neighboring wall, and then it hit him. If the gate couldn't be destroyed, maybe the whole structure around it could be. He remembered that old remark as he jammed his fingers into the crack where the wall met the doorframe, then yanked with everything he had. Wood screeched, metal buckled, and the whole structure groaned as it started to warp. He smashed straight through the lab wall in a roaring burst of rock and debris, and the scientist's experiment looked like a total win, until he stood in the wreckage and felt it hit him like lightning. The raw power in just one of his hands was enough to rip a huge boulder apart. Bursting out into a thick, shadowy forest, pure relief hit him like a wave. Because wow, he finally made it out, and that unbelievable strength in his bones made him wonder if it could even be used to tackle the climate. First things first, he had to figure out where he was, so he pushed for higher ground to spot the whole scene at a glance. He charged up a near-vertical cliff, gripping every tiny hold like it was nothing, and halfway up, the shock hit. It wasn't just his strength that had leveled up. At the summit, he steadied himself to scan the world below, and then a faint glow flared in his eye as he locked in and triggered a magnification function he'd been waiting to use. He realized it was an artificial eye, an engineered function that let him zoom in and rip distant objects into razor-sharp detail, and he had no doubt about it. As he hit the function, a low buzz crawled through the air. Then his vision snapped onto a massive, gloomy forest hanging on the horizon. He couldn't believe something that big was even inside the Empire, and that realization instantly turned his stomach, because it begged the real question, where the hell was he exactly? Then it hit him, another gift he'd been handed. Emotional suppression, a switch that erased fear and grief on contact so they couldn't get in the way of fighting. The scientist's real plan, turning humans into weapons, made his stomach twist with horror, and still, that eerie, perfect calm was downright convenient. He spat in the face of that forced destiny and hurled himself off the cliff, crashing down with a slam that shook the earth, then hauled in a ragged breath and swore it. He'd never be turned into a weapon. Right then, thump, 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 something massive pounded through the trees, and he whipped his head toward the sound to find it. A colossal airship wrecked and sunk in the forest, sitting there in eerie silence. He stumbled on a flight log buried in the wreckage, and the moment he saw the script, he knew it was from the northern kingdom of Canaan. As he rifled through the pages, a heavy sigh tore free. His hunches were right. The log was stamped a whole century old, and it spelled out how the monster attack had slammed the vessel down. A wave of relief hit him. At least he'd prepped a little. Because with the airship blasting off from Canaan and then crashing on its third day, he could finally pin down where he was, roughly, from the wreck's trail. Then, just like that, hunger vanished from his body, and that weird emptiness felt way more disturbing than food ever did. So he panicked and shoved down the biscuits he'd found just to be safe. After he finished eating, he set his mind on one move. He sprinted east, praying he'd stumble on a town where answers waited, because even a busted-up settlement could still have people who knew something. But just as he started thinking, a dark idea crept in. He prayed the people he found wouldn't look at him with pure terror, because he still remembered the screams of monsters from his past, and deep down, he barely had any hope left. Suddenly, a brutal stench hit him like a punch, and he recoiled with a disgusted gasp, grabbing his face, panicked, wondering where that vile smell was coming from. He felt it in his gut. This was close. Then he leaned through a curtain of bushes and confirmed his hunch as a sound crawled out from just beyond the leaves. Beyond the bushes, a screeching horde of tiny creatures surged into the clearing like a living nightmare. Goblins. The goblins weren't alone. They were right in the middle of tearing into two female elves, and he felt it hit him with stunned disbelief. This was the first time he'd ever seen something like that beyond campfire tales. Rage slammed into him, his fist locked tight, and he stayed hidden, watching. He flexed his armored hand, grinning like he already knew his body's top-tier specs would hit hard. Now the only thing left was whether it could cut through these creatures, so resolve surged, and he charged forward to find out. With that thought roaring in his head, he charged ahead with a thunderous step, so heavy the forest floor trembled. He dropped on the goblins in a blur, bellowing a savage greeting, then tore straight through their ranks, pure fury, unstoppable and ruthless. The violence hit like a tidal wave, and he kept scrambling for the right word: slaughter, massacre, extinction, anything that could match what he'd done, but none of them ever came close to the sheer, total devastation. All he could do was stare in horror. This scene was pure, unfiltered hell, and it was a cyclone he'd built with his own hands. Blood-soaked and silent after the chaos, he stared at what he'd done and judged his enemies. These weren't monsters at all, and that's why the fight turned into a brutal, one-sided slaughter. As that black blood splattered from his claws, he finally had to admit it. He got lost in the moment. The massacre was so clean and brutal it felt like he'd nailed a flawless run in a game. A sudden gust tore through the trees, rustling the canopy above, and dread slid into his chest. Yeah, he'd gone too far, just like he feared. Elsewhere above the rooftops of a nearby town, a tired sigh broke free and drifted into the night air. Daira's sigh came from a woman, and when she spoke to her armored companion Liesel, he couldn't help but gawk at her riches. So she snapped it off, warned him not to talk like that, and told him that if this latest incident boosted his rating, then maybe he could finally climb into a better role. In the middle of the town square, a woman with long, reddish hair and a massive witch's hat lets out a heavy sigh, then grumbles that there's nothing left worth exploring. She looks completely fed up, and behind her, this young guy in full armor just keeps staring, utterly lost in the sight. His breathing turns ragged, a blush blooms hot on his face, and drool slips out like he's forgotten how to act. Just as the moment heats up, two newcomers crash in. Lena, a blonde young woman, calls out Gister, and she's with a dark-haired man Gister calls her brother. Lena demands, "So it's true you've been roaming into the forest," while Gister laughs and needles her brother, saying if he ever grows into a better man, she might finally let him wrap her in a hug. She tells Lena it's true, brushing it off with a cold snap. She doesn't want to hear a word about her big brother's craving to explore. Then the story flips, and we finally see what they've been talking about: the massive forest of Florides. Right at the thick, looming border stands Uno's monster of a figure, waiting in the shadows. Chaos explodes the second a band of adventurers gets completely overwhelmed. Gister is yanked and restrained. her face twisted with pure anguish, while Lena screams in terror as little goblin-like creatures swarm in, kicking and tearing at them with claws. Maces realizes with horror how bad this has gotten. They really did draw the short straw, and right beside the brutal massacre of their party, the ground is still soaked in blood. Right in the middle of the chaos, a whole new fight erupts. Uno barrels in and swings his armored fist straight into a massive reptilian beast's head, cracking bone on impact and blasting dark blood out of its jaw. Elsewhere in the chaos, a giant bald brute, blood and gore splashed across his face, throws his head back and roars, then rips a creature apart with his bare hands. Soon, the chaos of battle fades, and a crackling fire takes over. Branches stacked up with a huge hunk of meat, sizzling like it's about to burst with flavor. Monstrous Victor plunges Uno into the cooked flesh, tearing and devouring with ravenous hunger, though his face screams that this meal still isn't satisfying. That first bite instantly turns on him. He whips his mouth shut and violently spits it out, screaming it tastes like pure crap, then grumbles that the alligator-like monster had only itself to blame for coming at him first. He leans back and drains a long swig from his canteen, wondering if his taste buds are still human, or if that nasty aftertaste is the punishment for not draining the creature's blood clean. He grumbles that if his body was going to get hacked and remade this far, then they should have finished the job properly. His thoughts snap to his nightmare situation, and he blurts it out to the little gelatinous creature nearby, still reeling from the gut punch of waking up as a monster, so stuck he can't even speak human anymore. He grabbed a few canned rations and kept talking, admitting that even with everything that's left him like this, and even if hunger never really hits, he still feels like he has to eat because deep down he still wants to stay alive. He can't stop thinking about his human family, sure his sister made it out of whatever wrecked the Empire, because their blood always runs strong. He pictures his father staying to fight, and then boom, a memory hits. A blonde woman, one of his sisters, hugging her little daughter close. And now he can't ignore it. What if one day he finally meets a descendant of theirs? Even with that nostalgia tugging at him, he flexes his brand new, powerful limbs and admits, yeah, he's obsessed with this supreme, muscle-bound form. And then, like a flashback with teeth, he remembers what made his old self tick. He was crazy about horror video games. He loves his new body for a second, but then this wild urge hits. He wants to be around other humans right now. He flashes on just sinking into his monster life, but it's gone as fast as it came. In the end, he decides the truth. He'd rather be human, and with his monstrous power still in his hands, plus the ability to speak human languages, he thinks this setup could be the perfect one. With his goal burning in his mind, he plops down beside a crackling campfire with his tiny slime buddy and starts planning on the spot. If the Flurid Empire really is gone, he tosses the language problem aside for now and figures out which country to hit first to make real friends. He remembers the raw power of his fallen nation, the Flurit's Empire, the biggest and baddest in the world, where state-of-the-art tech fueled its might, letting it hold the line in a brutal war on 4 fronts for as long as it lasted. But once he sizes up the nearby territories, his eyes snap to the northern neighbor, the Kingdom of Conan. He knows their language well enough to survive the talk, and he remembers this. Sure, they're not as polished as his empire, but their messy mix of magic and tech still hits surprisingly hard. Then his mind snaps to another target, the Einhell Republic over to the west, an elf land he knows well, where people worship nature like it's sacred. Since monsters are apparently just part of nature there, he figures they might actually let him in. Yet even with that slim hope, worry still gnaws at him. His hesitation isn't random. It's because the elves are magic specialists, and he knows charging in blind would be reckless, so he decides to check if his monster's body can actually shrug off magic first. For a split second, a useless thought about what male elves even look like flashes through his head. Then he snaps his focus back. He wipes the west off the board and shuts the south down too. Then he recoils at the thought of the Sicilia Kingdom to the east, because he's already heard about their exterminators, the special unit that hunts giant monsters, and the second he clicks, he realizes he'd be their first target. He locks in his decision and barrels north toward the Kingdom of Canaan, hunting for a human settlement. His real mission is to map the lay of the land first, and he vows to tread carefully, dodging every patrol from Sicilia. His journey kicks off. Just for a heartbeat, he fantasizes about planting a flag, then shakes it off. Right then, a distant roar rips through the quiet, snapping him on high alert. Elsewhere, a crew of adventurers huddles around a crackling campfire, and Gister's brother snaps, questioning why they're even digging at all. Because all they were told was to search. Gister grumbles right along, and Liesel tries to lift the mood. urging the Sundela to perk up and look alive. Her brother breaks it all down. Turns out the old empire's territory is now run by elves, and that shift happened in just 5 years. And he can't stand it, grumbling that this crap is guaranteed to set Jester off since we all know how much she hates elves. Liesel starts guessing their target is buried deep inside the old empire's lands, right where nobody dares to go exactly because of that. Then he blurts out the thought, maybe there's an insane treasure hidden out there, waiting to be found. Lena swears this kind of adventure sounds amazing, but Jester immediately scoffs, calling any empire treasure science crap, and then flat-out claims Cecilia people like them don't want science, don't need it, and would never touch it. Jester snatches Lena into a crushing hug out of nowhere, blurting that she's a cutie and warning her not to pay any mind to her hard-headed brother, while he gushes over her like she's the best thing in the world. Meanwhile, Liesel snaps Lena back to reality, urging her to stay on guard because danger is real, but Lena just shrugs and says it feels like a fun picnic. Dehila softly pats Lena's head, her face turning gentle, and she rushes to apologize, swearing she only meant to lift everyone's spirits, not force Lena to go out of her way like that. Blushing under all that affection, Jester blurts out that she can't take Lena's cuteness, and she wants her as a little sister. Lena giggles and says it tickles. Then Jester's brother just watches them and grumbles about how he'd rather not admit it, because the idea of actually saying they should be siblings feels insanely cringy. That night by the fire, laughing, glowing like it would never end, still haunts me, and it makes me ask the brutal question, why did those perfect days end so close to the edge of death? In the chaos of battle, Liesel staggers backward in pure shock, eyes bulging with disbelief as a brutal wall of fire detonates and slams into his armored torso. The blast slams into him and throws him flying backward from far away. Jester just watches in terrified silence, then screams his name as goblins swarm around her. While Jester's brother barrels through the horde, twisting and smashing creatures to the ground, he drops one and immediately slams to a stop, because a hulking ogre has blocked his way. His swagger dies on the spot, and cold fear hits as he spits out a furious curse about the nightmare he's just walked into. Meanwhile, Lena snaps at Jester, warning that her brother is running on fumes. Jester glares, soaked in the bloody wreckage of her own brawl, trembling as she swears to herself she didn't get careless, while the goblin army's ogre boss flashes a smug grin, sure his experience will crush foes like these. She realizes her mistake wasn't random at all. The ancient imperial ruins scattered across the battlefield jammed the whole fight, flooding the area with blind spots and turning their defense into a nightmare. Then panic slams in like a dread-filled flashback. The anti-magic shield got snatched by that idiot. Right on cue, a nearby goblin kicks a swirling magical device into motion, and the ogre's grin stretches wider. The world goes ice cold as she realizes, if her magic gets snuffed, they're finished, dead. Then the goblins pounce on the opening, cackling while they surge forward. One darts straight for Lena, she chokes on a terrified gasp, and Jester can only tear out her friend's name as that thing drops down on her. Jester gets instantly crushed by a living nightmare. These creatures swarm her, ripping and stripping her as she thrashes in vain. Right beside her, Lena screams for them to stop, but she's trapped in the exact same horror. Lena hits the ground, sobbing in pure despair, and you can't do a thing. Just watch goblins swarm her and attack. Then she chokes out an apology, heartbroken that she couldn't protect her. Fear claws at her, then hardens into grim steel. She'd rather die than be a goblin's plaything. So she gathers her last ounce of strength and blasts out a monstrous explosion from her own body. In a barren, jagged wasteland, a dark-haired woman stumbles and gets ringed by a pack of goblins that leer like they own her, fear snapping through her wide eyes. Then Uno's hulking armored bulk looms in, his heavy boots thundering across the rocks as he stares at the chaos, utterly confused, wondering how this giant suddenly showed up. From that high spot, he glares down as the battlefield turns into pure chaos. Goblins spill over the wrecked ground and swarm until they fully ring the lone woman. Creatures swarm in, yanking at her and roaring for her to get out of the way. Trapped, she snaps. "What are you doing?" Uno steps toward the horde, his voice rolling out like a low growl, and he blasts them with the truth. He came here because this place reeked of goblins. Then he can't hide it when he finds humans standing right there. His eyes rake across the carnage and land on a fallen adventurer sprawled in a pool of blood. And somehow, he can tell the man is still alive. The goblins snap their attention to their new captive. One goblin jabs a claw at the dark-haired woman and roars that she's their 7th victim, and that they'll do whatever they want with her. Out of nowhere, Uno slams in, snatching a goblin by the head and crushing its skull in his grip. then roars that they're blocking his view and demands to know exactly what they're doing. She rushes forward and flings the tiny creatures aside like it's nothing. Then the woman gasps in pure shock, realizing a monster is actually helping her, and wondering if some monsters are truly hostile toward goblins. Right as everything goes quiet, a surge of energy slams into Uno's back. Then he spins around like it's nothing, eyes narrowing as he realizes it's magic. Uno snaps his eyes onto the culprit, an evil goblin shaman, and with a furious burst his weapon screams toward its end, smashing it into oblivion. But the woman's face twists in horror when a tiny spectral wisp crawls out of the wreckage, and she realizes in one brutal flash that the very same magic that killed Liesel in a single blow is back. Only now it's still standing. Just when shock started to fade at how tough that creature was, a new nightmare stormed in, an even more menacing hulking ogre, gripping a club backed by goblins. Uno's locked eyes on the armored brute and called it the leader. Up to now, he'd only been running into low-level monsters, so this felt like his shot. He clenched his fist, drew in a breath, and decided to go for it. The ogre struck first, lunging ahead with a thunderous roar and smashing its massive club straight into Uno's head with a gut-wrenching thud. Strapped in place, the dark-haired woman watched the strike land, dead on, just like the hit that had blasted her companion across the scene, and her gut told her this was about to go horribly wrong. Uno's only scratched his head, unbothered to the bone, while the goblins shrieked like they were about to tear into him. Uno got hit with pure, crushing disappointment. Then, in a blur, he twisted and drove a vicious counterpunch straight into the ogre's torso, blasting a shockwave through the cavern and leaving everyone watching stunned. Yoga got hucked into the air, then slammed down so hard it detonated on impact, gore spraying everywhere, until all that remained was a horrifying blood-soaked stain. Uno scanned the wreckage with a shaky stare, then shot a look at his own fist like, "No, not again." He tore his focus away from the terrified goblins and locked onto the captive woman, telling her she was safe now and begging her not to fear. Under his breath, he swore it wasn't really his body, and that the truth would break through any second. He strode up to her and the young blonde girl she was shielding, then blurted out that saving their lives meant he owed them. Except he had to stay alive, so he'd grab something useful. He snatched a potion and a knife at first, but then his gaze locked onto a sword and the dark-haired woman begged him, insisting he could take anything, just not the sword. He just shrugged it off and apologized, admitting he had absolutely no clue what she meant, because that language gap between them was so thick it shoved her straight into panic and desperation. She kept begging, pushing the point hard. This sword was their team's proof they'd even existed. Then a memory slammed into her mind of her own smile, right beside her blonde teammate, the dark-haired young man, and that woman with reddish-brown hair. He ignored her screams, swung the sword over his shoulder, and stormed off, leaving her to rage after him, promising monsters would stay monsters, and she'd keep hunting him as long as he still carried their blade. Her angry shouts hit his ears, and Uno's muse went, "Guess we won't meet again, or maybe we will," because her vow practically lit a reunion flare. Uno figured it was smarter to disappear. Crouched over a tiny wilderness fire, the reptilian monster gets slammed by brutal regret for everything it did before. That's where Uno's eyes lock onto a dazzling sword he's snatched up, only to realize it's no ordinary blade, but a rare, insanely pricey magic sword that drinks magical power to unleash deadly special abilities. Then it hit him. This blade could stitch up his skin almost instantly, and pure shock took over. The realization of what that artifact was worth made panic explode in Joel's mind as he imagined sending it his way. He remembers saving her life after he drifted the woman back what he took from her, and he's been waiting for the chance to finally build a real, friendly bond. Meanwhile, in a tiny house tucked deep in the woods, Gister slumps and lets out a tired sigh, staring at the walls like she can will answers. Because in her own breath, she can't stop wondering, is Dyra really leaving? She whips around to Lena and swears, voice heavy, that she'll grab their sword and come back, then orders Lena to stay put right here until she returns. Swamped by emotion, Lena blurted out Ford Ironison as Gister yanked her into a crushing, tight embrace. Clutching close to her side, Lena blurts out her darkest fear to the red-haired woman. She's sure that if Nassin vanishes too, she'll die right along with Gister. She reaches for comfort, admits the thought of them going together never left her mind, but then she shuts it down hard. She can't let herself end up like the others, and when she apologizes, the truth hits fast. Lena has to stay behind because she doesn't want her to die. Her expression locks into iron resolve, and she tells Lena, crystal clear. If Lena's fear is what's making her quit, then Lena and her were never the same kind of person to begin with. She hurled one last scream into the dark, warning that monster to watch its back and wait for her. Then, far off by a fire, the reptilian thing froze, feeling it instantly, wondering who was talking about him. Words dissolved into the night. Under a sky packed with stars, the crescent moon hauled. Elsewhere, Uno kept pushing forward. His stomach growled with hunger, but his brand-new body refused to slow down, with zero sleepiness and not a single blink, like time itself forgot to slow him. Meanwhile, the reptilian monster sized himself up. No fatigue hit him, but the thought of needing rest wouldn't leave him alone, so he decided tonight was training too, and he made himself force sleep. With the monster finally settling down, Uno's mind snapped straight to real-life survival. His potion-packed backpack was bursting at the seams and way too small, so he craved a bigger one, more salt for his flavorless food, and even a hot pot if he could manage it, and the thought of getting all that stuff drove him onward. He tore through the night until dawn finally cracked open, and when it did, he found it, an abandoned town bursting out of the wild, overgrown land. While he roamed the ruins, his eyes snagged on a familiar piece of machinery, an anti-aircraft gun, and nostalgia hit him so hard he almost couldn't breathe. He missed it. He remembered what it meant, the Floretic Empire's pride, a jaw-dropping piece of science, the anti-aircraft gun that wiped those winged monsters out of the sky and left every other nation choking on the same threat. But that win didn't come free. Those monsters the Empire unleashed tore across the borders to places like Canaan, and it spiraled into a full-blown diplomatic nightmare, the spark that lit the war. With everything that happened in his past weighing on him, he scanned the streets hard. Border towns usually bristled with tall walls and heavy firepower, so the quiet here screamed inner town. He rushed up to a wall and tried to catch the name etched on it, but the letters had faded into nothing, like they never wanted to be read. He squints at a battered sign, fighting to read the ghosted letters, then he finally cracks it. "I'll quit." That's when he realizes he's on the northeastern side of town. Straight after getting his bearings, he pulls out a map and double-checks. Yep, he's at Quill. Now he's got choices. Push northwest and he'll circle a deep dill near the Canaan border, but go east and he'll reach the old military base at Carnash Rock. He decides to start his search for answers right where he stands, but right before he can move, a stinking foul odor rolls in, so his face twists in disgust. A rotten stench keeps crawling out of a shattered archway up ahead, and the second he recognizes what's behind it, a wave of pure hatred slams into him as a pack of pale. Ghastly ghouls reek the air so hard it stops his exploration before it even starts. No hesitation at all. He slams his pack to the ground and rockets forward, barreling straight into the creatures. His sudden assault slams into the pale humanoids, and their happy celebration instantly flips into pure shock. He blinks forward in an instant, dropping onto the terrified horde like a thunderclap, fist cocked to smash. His punch smashes through like a meteor, blasting one creature apart in a brutal, explosive spray of gore. Dark blood splashes over him as he stands frozen in place, while the survivors bolt away in pure terror. He stares at them pulling back, and one strange thought hits him like a jolt. Why are they all sprinting the exact same way, instead of splitting off to make sure they get out? Through the chaos, he spots a presence, like a hidden guiding hand steering the creature's every move. That coordinated assault is nothing but pure irritation, one loud roar of rage, and then he unleashes a crushing strike that rips straight through the horde. As he fights, he scans their every move, and then it clicks. These aren't random attacks at all. They aren't charging him head-on. Their motions are too clean, too synced, like one mind is steering the whole swarm. And that's when he lands the brutal truth. They're guarding something. His eyes track the fleeing creatures as they get pulled, one by one, toward a massive, crumbling school building at the end of the street. That sickening stench gets louder the closer he gets. His stomach flips, and he plows straight through the building's front as if it owes him money, only to slam into a massive gymnasium, big enough to pass as a whole makeshift settlement. The gymnasium hums with chaos. Pale monsters swarm in hordes, and armed goblins drop to their knees before a brutal makeshift throne, where a massive, horned commander sits and leads their grotesque army. In the goblin nest, Uno stares at the true mastermind of the horde, the Goblin Queen, and his stomach drops when he realizes that, sure, goblins may sometimes drag other races into their breeding, but most of their numbers are born straight from this one monstrous matriarch. As long as the queen is still alive, their nightmare of a reproductive cycle just keeps rolling. 34 goblins pop out every single day, and they're already reaching adulthood in only 20 days, such a blistering pace it feels almost magical. Disgust tightens into iron, resolve the moment the thought of that creature hits. He bellows one brutal word, "Kill," and charges straight into the chaos, smashing into the goblin guards as if there's no other way. He snorts at their desperate attempt to shield their queen, calls it all pointless, then brutal and merciless. He plows through the swarm of smaller beasts, spraying their dark blood all over the chamber. The air is thick with horror, as the floor is strewn with the mangled corpses of the goblin whores. He stands in the middle of the wreckage, staring down what he's already shattered. Nearly everyone is gone. Now all that's left is the queen, but the moment he reaches for her, he hesitates. Reluctance slams into him like a punch of pure disgust. He refuses to get even one step closer, because that stench is horrific, and his mind instantly paints them as a swarm of foul monsters, circling a terrified captive who can only plead for death to finally end it. He gripped himself back from panic, then understood. He had to wipe them out, and he couldn't get any closer. From far away, he starts to siphon power for a brutal attack. The leftover goblin guards spin around, baffled, and then panic hits as they sense something terrifying out there, but they can't track where it's coming from. Uno decided he'd strike from a distance and hurled himself into it. He lined up a projectile, gripping a rough, heavy rock, convinced the only thing standing between him and success was his aim. He figures it'll be a cakewalk. Look at that target, the goblin queen, absolutely enormous. And with one vicious spin, he whips the rock forward, smashing her with explosive force and blasting gore across the cavern. He fires off another projectile, frustration flaring as he realizes his aim was set for the head, but it slammed into the belly instead. Still, he calls it perfect. Then the third shot lands with brutal precision, smashing a smaller goblin's head into nothing. The brutal assault rips the goblin queen apart, and her mangled corpse lies on her birthing mattress, while the wreckage of her slaughtered brood litters the scene. Once the cleanup was done, the captive blonde elf woman turned to Uno and thanked him with non-stop gratitude for rescuing her, breathing out pure relief like she just clawed her way back from the edge. Even after the win, he can't breathe through the stench. Goblin guts cling to him, and rage turns into disgust as he starts hunting for the nearest river to rip this grime off. He spots a place to cleanse himself, and with his mind and body finally fresh again, he steels his resolve. He's going to keep hunting. He strides through the town ruins, grinning like he already knows. This place is big enough that he'll find exactly what he came for. Search pays off. Pure joy erupts on his face as he spots his target far off and blurts out that he's found it. Right in front of him looms a giant, multi-story relic from a forgotten era, the abandoned shopping mall. He tears through the abandoned store, excitement surging as he searches. In the kitchenware aisle, he spots a heavy iron grill and a frying pan, pure barbecue gold. Then he swings to the sports section and grabs a giant hiking backpack. And the moment he sees it, he realizes that with a few tweaks, he can haul it on his back. That success hits him like a wave of pure victory, and he thrusts into a triumphant pose right outside the crumbling building. He keeps hunting inside, tearing through the grocery aisles like a man on a mission, double-checking every canned food and cold drink, then spotting the hard truth. The salt's been expired for ages. Next, in the home appliances section, his eyes lock onto a cooler box, and he instantly thinks, yeah, this is exactly what I need to keep any extra stuff I find from going to waste. With fresh supplies in hand, he stands ready and fully loaded, modified backpack locked on, iron grill strapped in, a cooler box cinched to his side and inside the pack. His magic sword, a potion, the frying pan, and cans of food, all set for whatever's next. Right in the middle of his growing rage, a terrifying thought hits him, hard. Then panic floods his face as cold sweat bursts out because he just realized he forgot to gather intel on the Empire. Panic tried to bubble up, then fizzled out, because he's sitting calmly on a mattress in the rubble, ringed by stolen newspapers, and yeah, he's only joking. He's been diligently hoarding whatever he can find, smugly musing that shopping malls are basically heaven, thrilled to finally be around human-made stuff after all this time. After 200 years, he managed to salvage a few scraps from old magazines and newspapers, yet most of it had rotted past recognition. He digs through scattered reports and stitches together the war's history, and just like he feared, the empire's in ruins. He even remembers the West crumbling, and he's convinced it happened because of one crushing force called hell. That's what finally drives him to the question burning in his mind most. What really happened after May 25, 1667? Before long, he stumbles on an article from that same day, one that screams a decision has been made to fire the ultimate trump card. And the moment he reads those words, a cold dread claws at his chest, like his natural imperial instincts are warning him that something dark is about to break. And the threat just hangs there, thick and unsaid. He sank into the rubble of scattered newspapers, and the words burned in his mind. Was his homeland really gone for good? He stays silent, and the sheer weight of what might happen crushes down on him. The idea of going back had always haunted him, a distant itch he told himself he'd chase someday, until fear slammed the brakes, and that crushing dread made him work overtime to never think about it. Now a brand new resolve slammed into his chest. If he wanted the truth, he had to chase it, and the only place was the imperial capital. Lying down, he stared at the road ahead and accepted it, ready to brace his heart for whatever waited out there, and one day, finally make the trip. As sleep started to drag him down, he snapped into action with one clear plan. Tomorrow, he'd ride straight to Luke Dill, a border town, and find out what was really going on with the kingdom of Canaan. Meanwhile, across town, Orlando was getting yanked by the shoulders as an urgent voice demanded answers, confirming that Luke Dill was exactly where the goblins' dance was happening. Arngel the speaker leaned in like he meant business and told everyone this was no small problem, so he came straight to Orlando's team, begging for their heavy firepower. Orlando waved him off, telling Arngel to stop acting so dramatic, yet Arngel didn't even flinch, just asked if he could handle the job. A confident grin snapped onto Orlando's face as soon as he was asked so politely. There was no way he could refuse that. Instead of bowing back, he demanded a huge reward, and his whole team stood lined up behind him. Then he declared that Takatsuki no Senjo had taken the mission, calling it the perfect warm-up for their brand-new recruits. Deep inside a choking forest, a crew of pale, gaunt humanoids shuffles forward, jittering with agitation, their mouths left gaping. Their unease snaps toward a hulking, armored monster planted beside a tree, motionless, like it's guarding a secret, while Uno stands there saying nothing, just watching those creatures. He suddenly bursts forward with a bright wave, startling the creatures as he blurts out, "Hey, I'm me. Hi, everyone who knows." He leans in and tells those baffled humanoids, "You're watching my imitation power in action." And yeah, he feared this body would scream wrong, but with his camouflage locked in, he pulls off something insane. The armored figure jerks back hard, grabbing his head like it's burning, and screams that it's all too much to survive. He blurts out an apology, admitting he totally blanked on just how high-spec his body gets when he's pissed off. And then he just stares, realizing the Empire's science is so advanced it can only be described as downright terrifying with his small, struggling vocabulary. His mind snaps back to yesterday. He basically crashed into sleep from pure exhaustion. Then it hits him. His new body doesn't need sleep at all, not even a hint of drowsiness, and that's when he reaches a chilling conclusion. There's one thing he has to be careful about. As he keeps talking to himself, he realizes he slept like the dead and ate the same way, like none of it even mattered. Then it hits. This is the real danger, because if he runs out of energy mid-fight, he's left wide open, so he has to stay sharp. Concentric rings, inside it tightened into focus with cold, mechanical precision. With his vision sharpening, he spots a huge castle wall ahead, proof he's finally hit the border town. And if that's there, then it has to be Luke Dill. He watched a gaggle of pale humanoids stumble out of the gate, sprinting like something terrible chased them, and wondered, were they even fighting the cannon people? Then he caught a different clue, and for a split second, confusion hit him hard. Recalling how he can mimic anything around him, he steps closer into the chaos. And when he finally gets a clear look, he realizes the pale creatures aren't soldiers at all. They're getting picked off by goblins. The border town of Luke Dill thunders with battle noise, like the fight is swallowing everything inside the walls. Slipping into the city under cover, he snaps on his camouflage and melts into the face of a building, watching from the shadows without anyone even noticing. His eyes snap to the heart of the clash. Those red claws on Kanan's right arms give his people away. A commander surveys the nightmare. His 50 soldiers are boxed in on every side by 300 goblins. He slams his order out, rallying them to lock eyes on each other's backs, then calls for the archers to get ready. From his hidden spot, he peeks at the commander's tactics and breaks down every move. Though he can't make out the words, he knows the instructions are top-notch. The sword work looks a bit rough, but it still lands, and he's absolutely not getting swamped by that goblin whore. Like he feared, those 300 goblins get erased in a blink, and the stench of them, dreadful enough to keep him at bay, still fuels his rage. He sneers at the pale humanoids as nothing but scavengers, and they scatter fast, fleeing the wreckage. With the fighting finally over, the captain grieves that he can't leave empty-handed, then snaps, ordering the mage Cassetta to fire up detection magic and hunt for any survivors. Right as the spell lands, and Uno, still hidden, erupts in a sharp, burning itch all over his body. The moment the magic snaps on, it exposes him. Right then, the mage yells to her captain that he's fleeing. The captain is stunned that full detection magic like this even exists, so he rips orders to his squad. Chase him down. Uno's heart crashes into his stomach as panic spikes. Did they spot him because of his imitation, or because their magic dug him out? He rockets off the building, suddenly realizing they've pinned every move. He's fully detected. Rage flares as he berates himself for getting so hyped over his camouflage that he dropped his guard. With these humans nothing but a headache, he cuts his focus to nothing but one thing: escaping. As he sprinted away, one of the chasers, a female mage, smirked and insisted that with her superior leg strength, she'd blow past their target without breaking a sweat. A brutal surge of dark energy slammed into Uno and froze him mid-step. Then, from afar, the mage watched as a firewall burst into existence and sealed the path in flames, and Uno snapped around, bellowing a challenge. A man with dark, messy hair and zero fear finally met the challenge head-on. He stepped up like he owned the moment, ripped a huge crystalline sword into view, and somehow looked totally unimpressed by all that power. Uno stared down the soldier, his voice rumbling like a growl, and he grilled him. Was the guy really trying to bait him on purpose, daring him with that posture? Blood boiled in his veins, yet he had zero urge to throw down with humans, because he couldn't trust what they'd do once he unleashed his real power. His fist tightened, aching to act. He snapped his full focus onto the soldier. There was the one who'd thrown the challenge, and when Monster's looming presence hit him, the man's smug confidence wobbled. Orlando the soldier blurted out, stunned. He thought he was hunting some run-of-the-mill monster, but the truth hit him hard. He'd never seen anything like this before. Twisting toward his blonde partner, Orlando warned that their target looked downright lethal. Annie, of course, spoke his name, and Orlando even admitted with a shaky grin that he was starting to feel terrified. Orlando's whole vibe snapped into full commander mode. He roared at the rookies to back off, screaming that this thing wasn't even close to goblins. Then he grumbled at Arngil that he better not be doing this kind of threat for free. Who knew? He admitted that sending the amateurs back was the right call, then watched the soldiers get ready for war and yelled that he'd give it everything too. He charged forward, roaring, "Here I come." Orlando barreled ahead, and his squad snapped into formation to stop him. Mages and archers raising their sights with eyes burning in focus, fear flashing right beside it. Orlando roared the order to fire, and a storm of arrows and crackling magical energy tore from their ranks, slamming into the monstrous figure. The shots slammed into Onosa's armored body, but they didn't pierce a thing. They shattered or skittered off harmlessly, and Orlando just stared in disbelief as he realized his enemy had taken zero damage. Uno slammed into the vanguard without losing speed, knocking soldiers flying, and Orlando's grimace deepened as he realized that creature was tearing their formation apart by itself. He smashed through the soldiers like they were nothing, and the shock on one man's face said it all. He could barely accept that the first coordinated strike hadn't even managed to kill the monster. As he watched his troops crumble into chaos, Orlando realized they'd been outmatched, and he'd have to step in personally. A grim smirk flickered across his lips, and that creature's ruthless power sent his blood surging with savage excitement as he geared up to charge straight into the fight. UNOS lets out a brutal roar, screaming to know who kicked off the fight. Then Orlando drops from above with his sword held high, declaring that UNOS is the one who's to blame. Blade crashes against Uno's armored hide with a brutal clang. Uno's eyes narrow as he realizes the brute's swings are surprisingly quick, but he's already certain. No matter what, he's still too slow to keep up. Then the block slams into him. Orlando skids backward hard. His comrades, even Arngil, freeze in stunned silence, staring at Uno as he's just deflected their captain's sword with bare hands. Orlando's face tightens with grim, sinking realization. He gets it, this is bad. If this keeps up, his troops will crumble and lose heart. His eyes snap to Uno's, and suddenly the shadow around him turns darker, sharper, and downright monstrous, reptile tail and all. Orlando can't deny it now. This creature is pure nightmare fuel. He fights through the grave situation when Annie, the blonde warrior, suddenly rockets past him, her face locked in fierce, unbreakable determination. She screams her name in panic, staring as she barrels straight at the monster like nothing can stop her. A sudden arrival snaps Uno's focus. He freezes for a beat, tilts his head, and blurts out that a blonde beauty has just shown up. She lunges to finish her, but then she plants her feet and declares, "You're not getting past me." With jaw-dropping agility, she slips under his wide, sweeping attack, leaving him stunned, eyes wide, because he never expected her to dodge it. Right before he can even catch his breath, she snaps up a crossbow and lines it straight at his face, so close that her ruthless, determined reflection fills his wide, stunned eye. A crossbow bolt slams into Uno's head, and Orlando with his men just freezes in raw disbelief, while Annie stands her ground, weapon still up, and Orlando chokes out the word, "Monster." Her shot hit true right on target, but the crossbow bolt jammed in the monster, and Uno's head did nothing to stop it. It snapped its attention to her. Orlando screamed her name as she lunged too close, and she finally saw the danger staring her in the face. Without a shred of effort, he snatched Annie up, his huge hand clamping around her torso, and yanked her off the ground as she let out a strangled gasp, trapped in his crushing grip. Uno gripped her loft and watched her like she was his captive, smug thoughts spinning as he silently admitted her body was perfectly trained. And the feel of holding her hit him as weirdly pleasurable, even nudging his curiosity about her measurements. His mind snapped to what he'd do next, maybe tossing her even farther away for a second. Then his attention got yanked right back to her body, and confusion flickered across his face instantly. Suddenly, the reason hit him like a punch to the chest. He'd just figured out something wild about her size, and Orlando could only stand there, totally frozen, watching in disbelief. Saw the monster's brief opening and snatched the moment. Then Orlando's roar tore through the air, rallying his men as he proclaimed that Annie had gambled her life to carve out this chance, and they couldn't waste it. Together, they smashed forward. Their attack got swatted off with pure, careless disdain. Uno muttered that he'd let it slide for the sake of boobs, then flicked his powerful arms and scattered the soldiers like they were nothing more than dolls. With his men scattered to the winds, Orlando lunged straight in, only to have Uno's arm slam his sword away with a thunderous clang. The warriors froze, gaping in disbelief, screaming, "How again?" With the danger stamped out, Uno barrels back to his captive and winds up a massive fist to smash her. "New Annie, Orlando." Orlando yells, but Annie's face snaps cold as she yanks a glowing blade from thin air, and Uno's eyes go wide with the sickening realization. It's a magic sword. Just as his fist was about to land, she shoved a glowing weapon straight into his arm, then grinned like a storm while the blade sank into flesh. Orlando saw the magic sword connect and his face snapped to pure terror. "We're doomed." He choked out, drowning in despair. He stared at the brutal scene in front of him, his soldiers boxed in around the monstrous Unos, and dread hit like a hammer. They couldn't beat it, not here, not ever. So he chose the only way out, make himself a decoy, tear the creature's attention away, and buy every second he could for his people to flee. As he braced himself for the sacrifice, he kept his eyes locked on the creature, wondering how much longer he could possibly hold out as a distraction against something that powerful. The monster shot up its hand and drove a single armored finger straight at it. Orlando got hit with that gesture out of nowhere, his eyes popping wide with pure disbelief, while his companions stared on, alarm climbing with every second. He was left speechless. His own desperate plan to save everyone by sacrificing himself had seemed impossible, and yet the monster was now handing him that exact chance. When they saw him hesitate, his soldiers shouted in worry, but he snapped back with a razor-sharp command, ordering every last one to stay back. When he stood there alone and stared down the creature, its gesture finally made sense. Uno wanted a duel, a straight one-on-one showdown with him. Staring down the monstrous Unos, the blonde warrior snaps that any more fighting would turn into a brutal one-sided slaughter. And right then, Unos realizes he miscalculated everything because he's made a grave mistake. Steels himself, realizing this fight has to end right here, right now. With no other option, he surges forward in a blur, slamming the distance shut between himself and the warriors. Orlando roars back at the charge, snapping at his comrades and demanding, "Do you really think you can win by yourselves?" He slams the brakes on their foolish doubts, shoves courage into their hearts, and swears that if they all make it home, he'll buy them the best drinks. He suddenly yanks the blonde warrior's head up, making her flinch, then snarls, "Cover your chest. If you don't, I'll attack you myself." She fires off a quick apology, but the second tears well up, all she can manage is, "You idiot." Landau snaps his focus back to the towering presence of Unos, and the truth hits him hard. Deep down, he knows better than anyone that there's no way he can beat him. Orlando keeps staring at the whole mess, because even if Uno's purpose is a mystery, the creature has picked him for a reason. The power gap is brutal, yet Orlando refuses to care. No one gets hurt. He figures smart beings are usually trouble, but right now that braininess is the edge he needs, because Uno is out there, waiting for Orlando to finally make his move. He grips his captain's duty like a lifeline, determined to bring as many of his men back alive. And once that resolve locks in, he barrels straight at Uno's, yelling that he's kept him waiting and that he'll throw his own life on the line. As he lifts his sword for the blow, his face turns stone cold. Then he snaps that he'll do this, but he's not doing it for free. He squared off against the monstrous Unos, and the thing tightened its massive, armored body like it was about to unleash hell. Raised his sword high, ready to slam it down in a brutal overhead strike on that crouched creature. From far away, Arngil Annie Cassetta and the blonde elf could only stare in grim fear, while the elf shook hard and clutched her chest like something inside her might snap. With a determined shout, Orlando tore forward and slammed his blade downward, right as Uno's emotion burst, detonating through the ground and blasting it apart beneath them. But the creature's speed smashed every expectation. Uno slipped the attack clean, then snapped back with a counter that clobbered Orlando's side. The captain's shock hit like a wave because this monster was insanely faster than before. Faster. Impact hit him like a thunderclap. He reeled, his face twisting in raw agony as Annie and the elf shouted his name from the sidelines, terrified. Even while agony screamed through his body, he clamped down harder on his sword, swearing that one more brutal slash would be the turning point, and he dragged himself forward, refusing to accept that it was over. Those huge, sweat-soaked eyes screamed the truth. He was hanging on by a thread, forcing himself to stay conscious and keep fighting. The pressure crushed everything. Then came a sickening crack as the bones in his hands shattered, blood blasting from the ruined flesh, while he choked out a raw gasp of pain. His sword slipped from his broken grip. Uno hooked a hand into his head, yanking him up off the ground as his comrades screamed his name. Defeated, Orlando swallowed his fate and thought, "This is all I'm ever going to reach." With his enemies finally crumpled, Uno snarls through clenched teeth and hurls a tiny object onto the ground, *SPLSH*, as it lands with a wet smack. The object just sits there motionless, while Orlando's comrades lock up in stunned silence. But Orlando stands right among them, unharmed, breathing steady, and utterly baffled by what's happening. Confusion crashes over him as he blurts out, "Did I mess up?" Then his mind spirals into a darker thought. Did Uno's poison my head somehow? Right behind him, the monster's creature groans, stirs, and staggers back upright. Still locked on the strange event, he freezes as the blonde elf woman steps up, dread sharp on her face. She calls his name hesitantly, while the other soldiers awkwardly shove their eyes aside. He snaps his head toward her, utterly baffled, and before he can even breathe, she cuts right to it, straight up asking, "So, when was the last time you washed your hair?" Before Orlando can even speak, the soldier on the ground blurts out the answer for him. "About 3 years ago, I think, that's what I remember." And the whole group gets hit by a wave of sick, horrified shock. The air instantly erupts with a chorus of raw, collective disgust. Then it hits him, realizing the truth at last, and he bolts like crazy, howling that it's disgusting. Behind him, Uno, who only meant to fake being hurt, lets it slip that the grime genuinely crushed him, and he swears he'll smash Orlando the next time they run into each other. When the chaos finally settles, the blonde elf woman can only think, "At least I didn't die for nothing." But deep in the forest, Uno stops dead, his breath hitching as a fresh scent hits the wind, human blood. He flashes a grin and jokes about how handy his brand-new body is, even as that nasty smell drifts somewhere far off. Then he steels himself, sure that if he sharpens his senses, he'll track it down, and he dives in to investigate. On a desolate road, Unos, clad in armor, looms over 3 dead travelers sprawled in pools of their own blood, bodies torn apart beside a discarded bag, and he lets out a calm, almost cheerful condolence like it's nothing. He scans the wreckage and locks in his verdict. Those wounds weren't laid by some monster. Then he spots it. Their gear has been stripped clean, and muddy carriage tracks run from the slaughter straight into the forest. Because this was a bandit raid, and they didn't just kill, they stole the victim's cargo. Cold logic hardens in his mind. If they kill and steal, then taking their stuff back should be fair game. Once that excuse locks in, he snaps into action and follows the trail. Riding the tracks, he rockets past the bandits, slams down with a quake-inducing thud, and instantly his monsters surge into existence, making the men scream as the beastly figures pop up out of nowhere. The sudden arrival slams into their ranks like a thunderclap, and panic erupts everywhere. Azuno barks out a gut-wrenching roar as one of the bandits by the covered wagon yells in pure confusion, demanding to know what just happened. Panic erupts, someone's brake turns into pure fleeing terror. One man's face twists with fear as he begs his comrades, "Don't leave me," and Uno Icecom tells them, "Don't run." Moments later, he strides away from the suddenly silent chaos, seething with disappointment that nobody even raised a fight. Then he trudges up to the abandoned carriage, wondering if all that quiet means whatever's inside isn't worth much. He yanks the curtain off the wagon and bam, inside 5 women and a little girl are crammed together, staring up at him with wide, terrified eyes. Among the captives, one lean prisoner with crossed legs shoots his arm up and peels off a smooth, blank white mask. That sight lights him up. His eyes flash as he stares at what's inside the wagon, erasing his first judgment on the spot, and now he's sure the cargo is valuable after all. He leans into the wagon and spots it. Those captive women weren't passengers at all, they were meant for sale, and then he clocks the twist. The cargo's already packed tight, fully loaded. He weighs his options, his eyes stuck on what looks too tempting to ignore, but his real craving is the daily essentials. Then a sharper plan snaps into place. Chase the bandits that just slipped away and follow them straight to their hideouts. Spare thoughts get snatched by overhearing ears, and the second she hears it, one of the women shoots back, urging him to run with that plan right now. The creature tugs the curtain back just a little, and the red-haired woman clutching the young girl tight looks up at him, voice trembling as she cautiously asks, "Did you save us?" He doesn't answer with words. He explodes into action, snapping forward with a sudden, violent strike and smashing the bars of their cage, sending the women into stunned cries. The cage door's metal bars explode apart, shattering and spraying outward as the brutal hit unleashes sheer, unstoppable force. Leaving the women totally baffled, Uno shoots one final look at the scene, burns it into his memory, then turns and faces Lee. He whips away from the wagon, taps his head like a light bulb just sparked, then braces to leave. Deep in the forest, he freezes. Then a long ribbon sensor unfurls from his head as he sniffs hard, tracking the exact scent of the bandits racing away. He snaps onto the trail and can't stop marveling at the Empire's wild tech. Every one of his physical powers and all 5 senses are pushed past human limits. He trudges ahead, pushing his new form to the edge and squeezing out every sacrifice he paid. And even though he doesn't need weapons, his anger still simmers, because he'd rather keep his communication skills and his manhood. His internal monologue gets cut off as he zeroes in on the scent he's been chasing. Then he shoves his backpack into a nearby bush, flips on his imitation function, and sneaks up to a dark cave mouth, certain the smell is coming from right inside. He tiptoes into the cavern, stunned by how cleanly it's built, and starts wondering if this is really the bandits' hideout. Because where's the lookout? Then his mind clicks. They must be so damn confident they don't even think intruders will get past them. He pushes deeper into the darkness, then slams to a stop in front of a set of iron bars he's found a prison with. Inside the cell, a brutal sight waits. Dead, battered young woman sprawled in the dark, right beside a pick-clean skeleton left behind by another poor soul. The sight of it makes bile rise in his throat. He even spots a tiny kid among the bodies, and it crushes him with horror. Rage hardens into the thought that those monsters deserve zero mercy. His grim resolve gets smashed to pieces when a thunder of loud, furious shouting blasts through the passage ahead. Seconds later, a man comes barreling into view, panicked and spilling apologies as he pleads to the person he calls boss. A towering boss stalks in, hurling insults at his subordinate, and he snarls, "So you ditched the cargo and bolted while the others are dead." He explodes with rage, roaring, "How could you leave it behind?" And from the shadows, one cold observer feels zero sympathy. The boss keeps roaring, screaming at the man not to freak out when monsters show up and bolt. Then Uno just listens and somehow understands every word, noticing how clunky their native tongue sounds and wondering right away if the boss might be a foreigner. He weighed the whole operation, and the moment he pictured a nationwide crime syndicate, his head filled with wild visions of a massive treasure haul, magical swords, rare spices, and deadly powerful potions waiting to be stolen. Right when treasure dreams started firing in his head, the case activity suddenly shifted. He peeped at the numbers and saw the bandits thinning out, and he knew the moment was here to strike back and face them head-on. He strode toward the door to the main chamber and froze because the entryway felt way too tight, and worry flickered. What if I get stuck? Then he tossed the fear aside. There was only one move: break through. With a thunderous crash, he smashed through the wall, spraying stone and splinters everywhere as he declared his arrival, while the bandit boss froze, staring in pure disbelief. But who knows, while everyone else was stumbling through the carnage, a monstrous figure loomed over it all, already finished with the bandit leader and his subordinate, its blank face snapping toward the newcomer as it roared. "Who are you?" The creature's side slammed into him, and for a heartbeat he couldn't even speak. His eyes went wide with pure shock. His eyes locked onto the impossible sight. An upper torso of a humanoid fused cleanly onto a monstrous, multi-legged spider body. The spider hybrid snapped to attention and pointed at him, firing a sharp question. Was he the monster who'd been snatching its women? Uno's jaw dropped because he never saw that coming. Rage boiled in the creature as its patience snapped, and it barked in the Ferlito tongue, so exact, so perfect, that everything clicked instantly, and Uno staggered back with a shocking realization. This monster was just like him, an experimental soldier of the Empire. Orlando, shockingly clean, sharp, and well-dressed, stands by a desk as Demand sits there, and Arngil snaps his gaze up the second Orlando demands answers about what happened. He leans in and fires off. "So, Orlando, how many years has it been since I last saw you?" And the second the question lands, Orlando just stares, totally blank, like he's been caught off guard. He breaks it down like, "Yeah, so much has happened," and relives the brutal roast his comrades threw at him. One always wanted to tell him he reeked, another said staring at him burned their eyes, and the third straight up declared he was just as low as a goblin. Hale's smile drops into something deadly serious. He says the goblins were wiped out with zero trouble, then he leans in to deliver the bad news. Orlando kicks off his report and says they've found a brand new monster. Then he raises his bandaged hands and admits that even their full-scale assault couldn't land a single hit, and it still slaughtered 7 of their men. It keeps going. This gray, ogre-sized humanoid with a tail is described in terrifying detail. And as Orlando talks, Arngil listens, sweat popping onto his temple as dread climbs higher in his chest. Orlando finally snaps, saying they were utterly, completely defeated. He teams up to recreate the monster's abilities like it's replaying a feudal war: brutal strength, iron defense, lightning agility, and brains to match. Worst of all, swords, spells, none of it can touch it. His face twists into a dark, almost manic grin, and he snaps, "Isn't that funny?" Bitter irony dripping from every word. Arngil swallows the grim news and snaps, "So what was the point of Orlando's Titan Slayer?" Orlando just shrugs and admits it's a pathetic tale, because he couldn't land a single hit on the creature. He snaps the question back to his superior, demanding how they're even meant to handle a foe like that. Arngil slams a hand on his desk, saying this is exactly what he needs to crack. And then he makes it clear. At the very least, they'll need a top-tier magic sword and a high-ranking wizard. Orlando shrugs away from Arngil, eyes narrowing as he wonders what the Night Order would do if they ever ran into this new species. Then he realizes, with a sinking certainty, they'd get overwhelmed and crushed anyway. Arngil, drained to the bone, pinches the bridge of his nose and asks if Orlando wants him to file this report. Orlando shoots back a no-sweat yes, because that's literally his job. For now, he says he'll lean on Arngil to step in and handle this new species, at least as far as his own power can reach. Still drained, Arngil admits he can't tell if that thing was a mutation or some species the world never knew. But he can't shake the brutal fear that it could crawl back someday, and Orlando snaps in panic, screaming at him not to speak a single word that could curse it. Elsewhere, the spider hybrid looms over its victim's splattered remains, savoring the thought that if more monsters like it crawl out, humanity gets wiped off the map in a blink. The creature locks onto Uno's and mocks him as a brainless oaf. But the moment Uno's hears the words, he realizes it's Ferlito's, and that this spider hybrid is an experimental Empire soldier, same as him. He tries to answer with a rough, guttural growl, declaring he's an Empire citizen, yet the hybrid snaps at him to cut the growling. No more talking. Uno's finally figures out they'll have to rely on text, period. As Uno sinks his fingers into the dirt, something yanks back, an invisible, transparent thread wrapped around him, while the spider hybrid growls from behind, daring him to move without permission. The spider hybrid finally drops its disguise, massive 8-legged power crashing down over the trapped Uno's. And Uno's can't even process it, realizing the trap was probably set from the start, while he fumes that amateurs are hopelessly useless. It roars at Uno's for botching the plan, no abductions, and getting caught. Then its whole scheme falls apart for the next girl. Right then, the creature's lower torso erupts in a blast of black fluid. It shrieks like the world's ending, clamps down on its groin, and wails in pure agony over its ruined, magnificent thing. Uno's watches in shock, realizing it never flinched when the bandits were hammering their captive. So yeah, he finally understands exactly what that pain feels like. He can't stop replaying the spider hybrid's brutal game, snatching a woman and her child, then forcing them to dance naked. Yet even through the pain, it's haunted by the memory, admitting with sick amusement that it was pretty fun, and wondering if it should do it again. The creature's handiwork screamed from nearby. There, blonde warrior Annie and her companion lay sprawled out on the ground, motionless and soaked in blood. He snapped his focus back to Uno, still straining against the ropes, and with a crazed cackle, he blurted out loud where he'd sink his next threads. Boots crushed a bandit's remains underfoot, as he twistedly tried to understand the rage that floods a body changed beyond recognition, imagining the agony of loved ones who don't even know you. Still, he decided Uno's body was worthless and swore he'd wipe him out right then and there. Uno snapped to the truth. Those human-made threads weren't going to stop the monster, and in the same breath he realized how risky his careless move had been because the thread itself was never meant for something like this. Then it hit him. The beast wasn't just prey that slipped up. It was another experimental soldier who'd only looked like he'd dropped his guard. His first mission was to rip away the distance, and he surged forward fast, trying to snap every binding thread in one go. Threads were everywhere, wrapping that blonde warrior up tight in a thick, trapping cocoon. He burst into action fast, but all that preloaded threads snapped tight and refused to let him move. Then the creature sneered at his struggle, told him not to waste his brain, and called him a damned monster for resisting. With a final, chilling declaration that it was over, the creature surged forward, determined to grab Uno and crush him completely. With a wild, shocking twist, the creature ripped off its humanoid disguise and exposed its real arachnid body underneath. Uno's froze for a split second, and that gap let the spider hybrid lunge in, ripping into his side with brutal, vicious claws. As Uno screamed in agony, the spider hybrid cackled and exposed the truth. Its skin mucus was acidic. Die, monster! It spat, and that corrosive slime chewed through Uno's arm, dissolving flesh and armor in the same brutal gulp. He crumpled to the ground, a grim groan ripping out of him the moment it hit. This attack was poisoned. The spider hybrid cackled and vanished down the road, and Uno felt that terrifying numbness crawl through his body. It didn't stick around to make sure. That alone screamed how deadly the poison was. With his life slipping away, one thought cut through the haze. The potion the kind, well endowed. With his body giving out, he clawed himself across the ground and scrabbled for that tiny bottle. No clue what it would do, just one desperate hope left. His fingers clamped down on the vial, and he forced himself into a kneel through the foliage, everything in him locked onto one desperate hope, that this concoction would finally work. To his shock, it hit like lightning. 1 second he was writhing in pain and numbness, the next it was gone. He stared at his right hand, moments ago eaten down to the bone, and there it was, perfect, restored, normal. A roar of disbelief and relief tore out of him. He was healed. That potion was unreal. He was flooded with gratitude, thanking the woman who'd handed it to him, his lifeline, though he couldn't quite remember what her face looked like. Down on the forest floor, Uno stared at the earth and replayed his last fight, admitting he totally panicked, because this was the worst crisis of his whole life. For the first time in 200 years, he'd felt real pain, and now he can't stop thinking. What if his enemy uses that same terrifying power on humans next? He finally realizes, if he hesitates now, more victims will come, just like the ones he's already watched fall. Still, he lines up his motives in his own head. He's not trying to be a hero, but he won't stand idly by while innocent women get hurt. Sure, he admits there's a selfish hunger behind his erotic cravings, and he refuses to let anyone steal that desire from him. Pain and numbness ripped away from his feet as the power surged through him, and that personal justification was all he needed. He decided to end the creature. Standing like a statue among the trees, he clenches his focus, sensing his target's scent and forcing himself to move fast because he's about to unleash the chase. The target is already running, because the spider hybrid is yanking a wagon through the woods, and inside it, the blonde elf woman can't stop shaking, terrified to the bone. Spider hybrid leaders haul her in as a prisoner, ogling her beauty and murmuring she'd be perfect beside a child, while one of them fantasizes about the cruel ways he can break her. Then a dark figure in a robe, wearing a skeletal mask, looms silently from a high branch, watching the whole scene. Vile thoughts cut off mid-breath when a brutal blast detonates out of nowhere. Right behind him, the tree explodes into splinters, and he whips around, jolted. Dust and debris explode into the air. Then Nuno rises from the rubble, fists still locked tight from that crushing hit. The spider hybrid gapes in total disbelief, screaming in his mind, how is he still alive? Sees it seethes, and when Uno stands in front of him, he spots the wagon with the blonde elf woman starting to roll away, his prize slipping out the moment that irritating interruption derails everything. Rage boiled in his chest. This armored brute wouldn't even inch closer, spooked by his threads, and when it started scooping up stones, he couldn't help it. Was this monster learning? The plan was brutally simple. After seeing Uno land those thrown projectiles with surgical precision, the spider creature would have to stay back. Can't chase, can't close in, not while the carriage is moving. That's what would give the women just enough time to vanish. Now it was down to one thing, a raw test of endurance between the two of them. The stalemate wasn't going to last, no way. The skeletal mage watched from the shadows, burning with impatience. I'm done with this, he snapped, settling into stepping himself. Uno was ready for the moment they tried to close the gap. Anytime they moved in, he'd slip back. And just to make sure everyone understood, the mage flung a stone, yanking the spider hybrid back and exploding with an enraged roar. "Don't you dare run!" He unleashed a storm of dark projectiles that screamed through the air, and Lunos twisted and slipped out of the way as the mage's fury kept escalating. The armored warrior lunged like a storm, hammering his advantage without mercy. No matter how the opponent tried to back away, he shoved the gap shut, sprinting in until there was nowhere left to run, and the spider hybrid shrieked in raw frustration as it got driven back again. He surged ahead on powerful legs, kicking up dirt like thunder, daring his foe to hurry. Unos watched the skeletal mage roar and unleash a torrent of black poison, begging for him to drop dead, while the armored warrior clenched his stance and braced as the corrosive spray screamed toward him. The poison didn't even land. He clocked the whole scene with ruthless calm, spider hybrids scrambling to run the moment they thought he'd be too distracted by the venom. That's what he was really thinking. Yeah, right on cue. His whole plan was a slick, no-nonsense loop. He'd rush in when they backed off, then fall back the moment they surged forward, using the trees to sweep away anything that tried to tangle him and flinging stones at every single opening. The skeletal mage snapped with fury at that dirty play and demanded he fight fair and square. He locked eyes with his opponent, mind razor-clear and laser-focused, because this wasn't some noble duel meant for honor. It was, and always had been, nothing but a hunt. He keeps hammering the spider hybrid, blow after blow, until the thing gets flung back, its body splattering against the trees, and Anaz won't give it a single breath as he crashes into it from every angle. The full moon spills pale light as the hunt presses on, step by brutal step. Days melt together into one brutal blur, while the spider hybrid, soaked in sweat and running on fumes, stares at the sky and can't even tell how many days have crawled by since the fight started. It honestly feels like it's been at war for more than a month, stamina screaming at the edge of nothing left to give. It's totally baffling. There it is, getting cornered like prey, and yet the real mind-bender is how mere humans can shove a monster around like this. A wave of dizziness hits the creature hard, and it realizes instantly, this is really bad. Its head spins like crazy, a clear sign it's been pushed to the edge. The real reason it's exhausted hits hard, it's running on fumes. Uno's non-stop harassment keeps it from eating or sleeping, and soon it can't spin out new threads or unleash any more poisons. Uno snapped at the hybrid's opening, driving a devastating strike straight into its jaw and blasting black fluid out of its mouth like a fountain. The creature staggers backward, crushed by searing agony, and it can't even wrap its head around what's happening, or why the pain is so brutal. Agony rips open a long-buried memory, being hauled into experiments by men in suits, wondering why it was always the one forced to swallow this suffering. That flashback crushes its hope, sparks raw despair, and it screams a furious, desperate roar, cursing its fate to the heavens. In a final, desperate gambit, the spider hybrid blasts a storm of projectiles in every direction. But Uno's lightning fast, slipping through the chaos and crashing in to land another brutal hit. He looms over the fallen spider hybrid as it writhes in the dirt, blood spreading beneath it, its whimpers shaking with pure agony, repeating, "It hurts," over and over. With a brutal, no-turning-back strike, he slams his fist down, shattering the hybrid's head and blasting the room with black fluid. With the deed finished, he whips around and strides off, leaving the twitching, headless corpse to spasm behind him as guttural, dying groans fade from the remains. His stride ends fast. He rockets forward and smashes his fist into a nearby tree, and the crack echoes like thunder. He slumps against the rough bark, then snaps into frantic scratching, ripping at his own armored face as his whole body trembles. A sudden thought hits, cold dread drops into his chest, and he realizes the words the creature spat out, their Ferlito, his language. He whips back to the corpse, disbelief crashing over him as the hybrid's final moment slips away, broken words slam into his head. No way. Under the cold moonlight, the creature's words slam into him, then it growls, "You're just like me." He replays the order he barked at the creature, one savage word, "Die." The memory keeps hammering at him, those desperate, tear-streaked questions from the hybrid echoing in his head, begging for recognition, swearing they weren't the same, they weren't comrades. And as the images finally start to fade, he keeps trudging away from the forest, step by step. He replayed it in his head, the sickening crunch as he smashed the creature's head flat, cutting off its desperate plea for comradeship. That memory hit like poison. Revulsion surged through him under the cold, full-moon glow, and he snapped away from it, snarling at the fallen creature. "Don't lump me in with you. You'll find it up on a jagged, rocky cliff." Uno's monstrous form surveys the wild terrain, his massive silhouette cutting hard against the sky. He takes a second to remember who he is. Uno's. And then the shock hits. He wakes up after 2 whole centuries, only to realize he's been warped into a monster, and the weird way he returned all comes flooding back. From where he stands, he explains that they're in the elven country, the Republic of Einhell, watching, in the quiet calm of the moment, an elven woman and her child strolling through their village like nothing in the world can touch them. Then he drifts off, chasing another loose end from that old mission, until it hits him, the Canaan recon he was supposed to conduct. After smashing that spider-like monster, he starts tallying his journey and tells everyone he pushed straight to the frontline city right on the border between the Kingdom of Canaan and the Republic of Einheim. He arrives, stares at the city's fortifications, and a grim truth hits him hard. Those plain ballistic defenses mean they've thrown science away. Meanwhile, deep inside an elven settlement, a blonde elf lays out the locals' way of thinking. How in Einhell they worship nature so hard that development barely moves, and that's why monsters don't just show up, they multiply fast. The strong elves can handle it, but for humans, it's a nightmare. From the cliff, Uno stares at the real problem and grimly thinks, this frontline city was meant to be armed with Canaan's top-tier weapons, just to fight monsters like these. When he stares harder at the weapons, shock slams into him. Ballistic, and the very same model they were using 200 years ago. Shock crashes into crushing disappointment as he realizes the town is shabby and falling apart. Then, with that gut punch, every last hope he had for the Kingdom of Canaan evaporates. He stood high above a blazing, sun-drenched valley, eyes fixed and mind already made up. Because the next stop he couldn't stop thinking about was hell. With a fierce grunt, he decided the time to go was now. That thought hit him like lightning. Then he launched off the cliffside, dropping fast as the wind screamed past. 16 days had already gone by since he arrived in this land, and every second he'd spent studying the elves had paid off. Now he set his jaw and charged straight toward the recon spot. From his secret perch, he replayed everything he'd learned. Elves were magic geniuses, no boring human chanting needed. But the real unfair part? They spammed powerful spells endlessly, like they had infinite power, and that felt like cheating. Then he clocked the details too. The women were unbelievably gorgeous, and the men weren't exactly slouches either. They could pull off this level of mastery because magic was woven into everyday life. He watched them sling it around for the most ordinary stuff, from sparking a fire to grabbing an item, even tossing clothes into the dryer. So that constant, casual practice made them ridiculously skilled. But there, crouched in the bushes by that calm pond, he realized the elves. Magic wasn't the real nightmare. Excitement surged through him, and he swore to himself the true terror was right here, finally the moment they'd been waiting for. He couldn't help but grin at their reputation. Everyone knew elves were famous for their looks, but seeing them in person blew his mind, and he'd call it an undeniable fact since he'd personally checked out over 100 elven women right here at this very recon spot. The river patrol was finally done, and he felt like he'd cracked the whole playbook on this deadly species. Now it was time to hit the next location. He slid into recon spot 2, and from the safe cover of the leaves, his gaze snapped tight. His iris pinched down as he locked onto his target. His eyes snapped onto a calm elf woman, flanked by 2 little kids. Then he knew it, he'd found them. This was the one he'd been hunting, Miss Number 6. He pushed on with his assessment, and among every elf he'd seen, Number 6 hooked him hardest, one of the 2 who actually posed a real threat. He studied her routine closely. No matter who she claimed to be, teacher or something close, right now she was always carrying children with her. And the name he kept locked in his head, yeah, it was just the nickname he'd given her. From far off, he kept staring, his mind caught on the scene's look. Because sure, being totally nude is one thing, but when wet underwear clings to the body and turns see-through, that was the real pull. This place hit him like thunder, and he couldn't stop staring at the raw power of that erotic madness. Then he stumbled on a brand new ability. When he focused, his vision snapped into sharper detail, letting him zoom in and inspect even more than before. He crouched in the bushes, heart racing as he wondered if the same thing would happen again today. And from his hiding spot, he watched the elf teacher and the kids lingering by the water's edge. Before he could even finish asking, the answer hit. Kids started messing with the teacher, and one of the boys yanked her clothes as the others piled on, and she squealed at them to stop. Uno watched closely, clocked just how gentle she was, and realized she'd be the perfect target for their chaos. Turning out his hunch about why the boys acted the way they did was dead on. The teacher's flustered out of his skin after the prank, but that young elf boy wasn't sorry for a second. He called the whole thing outrageous and pushed the others to keep going. Crouched deep in the thick foliage, Uno let out a tired sigh and replayed the day. Yeah, number 6 was just as incredible as he'd expected, and even that little brat actually held it together. Off in the distance, the elf teacher and her kids were laughing by the water's edge. Suddenly a rustle cuts through the water. He jerks to attention, peeks out from his hiding spot, and freezes there, startled, soaked in sweat. A river spills into view, and there she stands, an elf woman with long, pale hair and a dark blindfold locked over her eyes. She sweeps in right above his hiding spot, and the moment she's there, he feels crushed. She jabs, asking if he plans to deny her even a second of rest. Then Uno blurts her designation, her number 8, stuttering that she's here earlier than usual. Inside, all he can think is how she's a terrifying owl. He can't stop staring at her, and the truth hits him like a jolt. Number 8 is an elf he's crazy interested in, because her chest is ridiculously huge. He keeps his silent watch, remembering she's always flanked by 2 attendants. So he knows she's got major power in her country, and now he can't stop wondering why she never opens her eyes. And honestly, it blows his mind that her bath feels way more ritual than the other elves. Every little detail clicks into one hard conclusion. She's not just anyone. Number 8 carries a mystique that makes her impossible to ignore. The moment it clicks, it slams into him like a punch. His eyes blow wide, awe and terror crashing together. Utter overwhelm crashes over him. He can't miss a single move she makes, not even for a second. The thought hammers inside his head. She's a terrifying elf, and her power hits twice as hard as he ever imagined. After it all goes down, he stays planted in the forest, dazed, wiping sweat off his armored brow, trying to make sense of what he just survived. He watched the distant elves feast, and helplessness slammed into him, like, this is pointless. Even after they showed him something like that, he still couldn't move, couldn't act, so he had to swallow the truth and accept it. My thoughts snapped back to a different nightmare. A tall, skeletal creature that once tore itself apart in rage, screaming that its prized thing was gone and how, no matter how brutal it was to its victims, it still couldn't force the reaction it craved. He remembered, back when that creature still showed off, that it could unleash its strange abilities like it was born for it, and it had awakened to its real nature way before he ever did. That memory slammed him with a chilling question. Had all that piled-up emptiness finally pushed it over the edge into madness? He snapped his mind back to the moment, and somehow sympathy crept in for that brute, because the idea that he could meet the same fate wouldn't leave his head. Then the elves started to drift away, and he quietly prayed that number 8 stayed safe on the ride home. He spun away from the river and hit a built-in function to choke down his emotions, because right now, he couldn't afford to drown in things he couldn't change. Standing alone among the trees, he scanned the dimming world, and realized it was already way past time. That fading light screamed, now. And he knew the elves never showed up at the river after sunset, so this was his shot to scoop supplies and scrub every trace of himself clean. He told me about his evening chores. He sharpened his magic sword until it carved like a dream, while the carcass from his last hunt lay nearby, slowly bleeding out, and as he worked on the meat he grimaced. The flavor was off, and he knew he'd have to track down some salt. Nightwork finally ended, and total darkness dropped, while a crescent moon climbed above the clouds as bats burst into the sky. Deep in the forest's hush, Uno jolts up from the leaf-strewn ground, eyes wide, heart racing, and he can't find a single trace of rest. He flops down, wriggles, then snaps back upright, his thoughts churning like a storm inside his head. His rage won't quit because he can still hear that skeletal thing's words. There were a dozen reasons to go back, and if he returned to the Empire, he'd uncover more of them, more test subjects. He can't stop second-guessing. Was his hesitation just him wrestling with doubt? The truth hits him hard. He's been known for ages that he needs to head back to the imperial capital. That road is a death trap, slicing through an endless forest and crumbling ruins packed with monsters. He gets hit with a memory, him sitting in a busted, forgotten room, trapped in a sea of old newspapers, frozen on the same date, May 2. That memory slams into his gut, feeding his worst fear. He can't stop thinking the Empire is probably already gone, and everyone knows it, but he keeps refusing to say it out loud. If he dares to go back, he'll crush even the faintest chance that it's still alive somewhere. All alone in the dark, he can't stop himself. He asks the question that chills his bones. If he admits the worst is true, would he end up shattered the same way as that skeletal figure? His eyes drift to the river where the elves are bathing, and yeah, watching them every day feels fun, like a sweet distraction, but he knows it won't fix anything. He finally gets it. Dragging himself into this calm, self-made deception might be harder than just facing the truth he's been dodging. He stood tall, that armored back blocking the forest he called home. No more thinking now. With his decision locked in, he ripped into a journey across that lifeless wasteland, because deep down he knew exactly where he was headed, the imperial capital. He stopped atop the rocky outcrop and shouted to the people he was abandoning, letting number 6 and number 8 know he was gone. Then he spun on his heel and strode off like there was no time to wait for answers. His farewell shot straight toward a wild riverbank moment. Elf Teacher 6 was in the water with the kids, splashing and teasing them to stop as they tugged at her towel like they owned the place. Crouched behind the foliage, he stared at them as his courage crumbled, admitting it was brutally hard to lie to himself and walk away. His eyes stayed locked on that peaceful scene, and every second made him hesitate harder. A harsh, spotlight-bright room glared as a man with a chilling grin motioned a small, nervous girl closer, called her Daira, and ordered her to come undress, claiming it was the first step to becoming a great wizard. Then everything jolts back to the girl's crushing panic. She's sick to her stomach, terrified, and all she wants is to run home to her parents. A man in a doctor's coat leans in, checks her over, and grumbles that she should grow up fast so he can get back to his hometown. Left alone on the bed, she shakes uncontrollably as the trauma crashes down on her, wave after wave. As the choice slips away, Gister, an adult woman with magenta hair and a witch's hat, stands in front of scorched town ruins, staring out at a dead, stretched-out wasteland that whispers of a catastrophe long past. She jolts awake screaming, a nightmare still clinging to her like a nightmare's shadow. And when she sits up, her eyes go wide with raw terror as those brutal memories hit her again, sharp, vivid, and painful. Once she steadies herself, she strides through recall, a lively town in the kingdom of Canaan, and the loud crowd chatter hooks her. She whips around and asks what monster they've been talking about. Gister goes hunting for a teepster and spots a woman with long, reddish hair. She swears she already spilled everything to the guards, but Gister flips a silver coin and promises it doesn't matter if it's trivial. The moment she's intrigued, she agrees to spill every last thing she saw to Gister. The informant kicks off her story, painting pure chaos. She swears that she and the others were marching to a kidnapper's hideout when a monster suddenly burst in and turned their nightmare into a full-on bloodbath. It keeps going. Once the kidnappers laid eyes on that terrifying creature, they bolted almost immediately, and honestly, who could blame them? The woman admits the monster's moves don't make sense. It grabbed nothing and then bolted, yet it kept staring at them like it was hunting for something. Jester demands why it went after the carriage in the first place, but the informant shakes her head and says she has no idea. Her voice shakes with old fear as she ends her tale. Right when she thinks the thing is finally gone, it slams back into the scene, its massive head popping up at the carriage window like it never left. She wrapped up her account, saying the creature just stared them down for a moment, then spun around and walked off like it had nothing to do with them. She said it was nothing but a woman's intuition, but she swore that thing was staring straight at her chest, locked on like a spotlight. I just sat there thinking out loud like, do these monsters even see human women that way? The red-haired woman finally admitted that nothing came of it, and they were safe, but for the whole time, they stayed on edge, braced for anything. She shifted gears fast and praised Gister's beauty and those stunning assets, then offered her a high-paying job at her place, leaving Gister stunned as she tried to figure out if it was real or just a trick. But she still agreed to ask for help later. But her mind was already racing. She was sure the target was in Canaan, and it was moving closer by the second. She marched through the town with her companions, but their chatter drowned out as a predator got mentioned. Then a cruel memory snapped to life in her head, a man's voice calling to a young girl. "Come to me, Daira, you've got a great talent." At 8 years old, she remembered how a so-called mentor lured her in, using her magical potential as bait to trap young girls like her. That memory crashed into her mind like a nightmare. Her hometown burned and wrecked by monsters. Yet even after everything she'd survived at the hands of others, she kept grinding every day, training like her life depended on it, until she finally pushed herself into adulthood. She felt despair slam down like a crushing boulder, leaving her shattered on the unforgiving ground. Out of that despair, a brand new strength cracked into being. She stood there in the rubble, and looking back, she could only laugh at how far grief and rage must have driven her. With nothing left to care about, she became an adventurer, and even her own comrades betrayed and harmed her. She turned that agony into one cold mission, stalking monsters without mercy, until near-death moments stopped being rare and started feeling normal. His soul burned with one ruthless goal: wipe every monster off this world and make them disappear for good. Right in the middle of her relentless crusade, she finally crossed paths with the siblings, Renee and Lisa. For the first time ever, she wasn't just stepping into someone else's crew. She was being asked to build a whole new team, and Lysol turned toward her with that serious, hopeful look, asking if she'd team up with them. Lysol still laughs at his own casual mindset, thinking he could bail whenever he wanted, until Gister slides into their group and a confident warrior named Gista eagerly throws his hat in, locking in their brand-new party. Together, they fought through every brutal hardship and celebrated every hard-won joy, surviving countless life-or-death nightmares as one unbreakable squad. Soon after that brutal fight, the team was finally paid off, Lysol, drenched in blood but standing tall. Then they erupted, yelling that they'd slain the ogre with a magic sword. But when it was over, a battered, wounded fool just lay there on the ground and broke into laughter, relieved he hadn't died. Renab bolted to his side, snapping at him to shut up because his wound was still fresh. Gister, Rice smile blazing, looked down at the injured Lysol and told him to toughen up and become worthy, and Lysol, still shaking, asked what they should do with the magic sword, saying Gister, as the leader, should keep. He still remembers that playful question about his potion, and how Lysol admitted he'd already used it, because that little burst of trust made him feel like this temporary crew was finally a real home. But as the memory hits, a dark chill slides in. Monsters always steal the things that matter most. That memory ignites Jester's grit. She grips her resolve and declares the sword is the proof she once belonged, and she'll drag it back into her life no matter the cost. Her mind snaps back to Daira, tears flooding her eyes as she clasps her hands and begs, "Please come back alive." With her resolve forged into steel, Gister barrels through the city streets, long hair streaming behind her as she storms forward with one obsession driving every step. She clings to a silent promise in her head. "Wait for me, Rena." Who knows steps into a desolate, ruined wasteland, each heavy footfall kicking up dust from shattered buildings. He wanted to flex all the way, tearing out of Ein Hell and sprinting southeast toward the imperial capital, while battle scars scarred the land in plain sight. By sunset, he was already there, driven by an unbreakable sprint, the dying light stretching ghost-long shadows across the wreckage. He fights to spot where he is through the wreckage, guessing this has to be Idris, only it's so crushed it barely looks like a town anymore. A violent flash of memory slams into his mind, seeing a blonde elf woman, with another of her kind, cringing in pure horror as a catastrophic blast erupts, and she screams in disbelief, demanding to know if the elves themselves triggered the whole disaster. In that moment, he's standing right in front of them, soaking in their naked state, and he lets out a crude little imperial-style joke to himself, like this is somehow a fair trade for watching them. His memories start slipping away, but he barrels on, sprinting through the night with zero breaks. He catches the heavy silence, tosses a quick joke to himself like, "I can hear crickets," then flashes a thumbs up at the empty darkness. Chase comes for you like a storm, one powerful, ground-eating stride after another, racing through the wild at breakneck speeds. He yanks the kids to a stop, stares ahead at a towering structure in the distance, and recognition hits him like a wave. He only has one destination in mind, the Shabaru Iron Tower, and when he tilts his face up, he's staring straight at a massive structure hanging like it might topple, still standing strong beneath the moonlit sky, all because the Empire's tech is unreal. He snaps back to a vivid memory, 4 people like a glowing family, standing together in this soft, otherworldly light. He pauses, stunned by how visiting these places feels, because every step lands on family memories that hit straight in the heart. Right as he starts thinking, a pack of pale, gaunt humanoids suddenly bursts into view, swarming toward him and muttering as they stare, demanding who he is and where he came from. He stared at the swarm and caught their rotten stench in an instant, like a giant flashing neon sign. Then he muttered, "Are there this many because a queen's close by?" A jagged grin slices across his face, and the timing lands dead on. He faces the terrified crowd and declares, loud and clear, that he's ready to blow off some steam. With the sun breaking over the horizon, the nightmare comes into focus. A whole battlefield turned to carnage, strewn with dismembered, blood-splattered bodies from the entire horde. The ground is drenched and smeared, a grim stamp of how mercilessly efficient that slaughter was. Racing through the forest, he mutters that wiping them out took way longer than he planned, but he's still sure he'll spot the town of Aegis any moment now. He rips his gaze off the cityscape, and what he sees hits harder than he expected. The whole place is wrecked, and a cold, unsettling dread washes over him. He realizes this overgrown town isn't like the others he's seen. It's gray like ash from top to bottom. He stared at the total ruin, and damn it, his gut was right. The whole town was nothing but ashes burned to nothing. What kind of power could wipe everything out like that? Could it be the elves' magic? No. Even in a war, this kind of total annihilation felt pointless. Then wild images flooded his mind. He He could still see that man in a suit talking about an ultimate weapon, and a chilling thought hit him. What if this was exactly what he meant? For the Empire, it felt painfully believable. If they really had unleashed something like that on the imperial capital, the fallout would be staggering. With this fresh burst of urgency, he launched into another full sprint. Sure, he should *V rested, since he'd been running non-stop since leaving Einhell and even wiped out goblins along the way. But the thought got tossed aside instantly. His resolve had turned into iron, and now he had one mission: reach the capital as fast as any human could possibly make it. He screeched to a stop, then it hit him like a punch in the gut, the truth he'd been refusing to face. Why had he missed it for so long? He shot his eyes upward. Everything snapped into place right before his breath, and that truth was waiting there in plain sight the whole time. Right in front of him, a massive wasteland sprawled out, cold, empty, and dead quiet. He stood on the rim of an enormous crater, and the cataclysm's real size hit him like a nightmare you can't look away from. He lunged a step forward, and his boots sank deep into the wet, muddy ground right at the crater's edge. He dropped to his knees and ran his fingers over the ground, sand. In the middle of all that ruin, it hit him like a shock. He'd never been to a beach in his life, so was this what it actually felt like? He locked his eyes on the gigantic, hollow bowl carved out of the earth, staring like it held the answers, and wondering just how many explosives it would take to rip a crater that massive into the ground. He finally understood. This was the final, ruthless result of all that technological progress, and no wonder they quit it. One single, devastating sight was enough to reveal exactly why Kanan threw science away for good. His thoughts flashed to the Empire's shining cities, like proof of that road's promise, and then dread hit him hard, forcing the question: what if the whole path was one brutal mistake? With his resolve forged into steel, he launched himself skyward, rocketing straight for the Imperial capital. From the cover of dense foliage, the armored figure dubbed Uno's Pier bursts out and flashes a cheerful greeting you can't even see. But his focus locks onto one target, number 8, while he quietly marvels at her as she bends over. His light-hearted thoughts crash headfirst into something brutal. He's standing alone in a dead, crystal-strewn wasteland, staring at what became of the Ferlito's empire. And just like he feared, it's wiped out completely, destroyed by its own self-destruction. While the empire crumbles somewhere else, 3 intimidating elf women huddle together. One of them, the obvious leader, snaps that their greatest threat has changed. Now she'll hunt down the true form of the elves themselves. She explains, clear as day, that this is exactly why she's still making her observations. Because even right now, the scene shows her bathing, fueling her constant surveillance of her own kind. The view snaps back to Uno hidden in the bushes. He keeps staring at the elves, amazed by how beautiful they look, until a sudden jolt of self-awareness hits him hard. Is he really just hiding from reality with this obsession? The thought locks in like a punchline. Yes, he's really sprinting away from reality. That realization crashed into him like a flashback. Back when he was just human, clinging to a thin strip of hope, talking it out with his colleagues and betting everything on one wild idea. Even if the empire collapsed, maybe one survivor would carry the research and rebuild the tech that could restore his humanity. His memory slips away, and he's left staring at the giant, lifeless crater where that hope once lived. Then he grimly realizes his wishful thinking got crushed fast and without mercy. His mind spirals into a brutal storm of questions. Am I stuck like this forever, doomed to be alone, trapped without power? He doesn't fully loathe the monster he's become, but deep down he still aches for one thing: to be human again someday. For a split second, his despair gets shoved aside when the bathing elf grabs his attention again, and that gauge pops up, flipping his mind from crushed to fired up so fast the sight almost drowns his existential dread, at least for now. He thanks a mental image of an elven woman, the goddess of breasts, because he believes those twisted fantasies are the only thing keeping him sane and forcing him to stay in control, no matter what he's up against. This coping trick is born from a brutal thought. If he'll never be human again, then maybe for his own sanity he should stop fighting, swallow the fate, and finally see himself as the monster he's become. Yet as he watches the real El from his hiding spot, something snaps. He doesn't want to leave anymore, defiance flares back up, and he refuses to give up hope yet. A fresh spark of purpose ignites in him. He bolts forward, convinced that even as a monster he can still savor life like a human, at least a little. All that matters is chasing that goal, even though admitting it hurts. That pursuit is the very thing that drives his biggest dissatisfaction. Later, the trouble finally spills out during a dinner with his kin, because the food is awful, pure and simple, tasteless as dirt. Uno realizes that every time he bites into meat, His body begs for salt, yet he's always turned away when he tries to get it. He weighs every move, because the self and that fallen empire are dead ends now. No one will cut him a deal, so theft is all he has left. With a grim sigh, he pushes forward, lifting the ban on robbery, starting. With his mind locked in, Uno bursts into action. He's sprinting straight for the city of Canaan to snag salt, and maybe even a few spices along the way. The scene snaps to another beat. And in Canaan, that same city, Orlando is falling apart, gripping his head as pure frustration boils over. Captain Orlando's distress snaps the air. Arngel steps over him, all sharp eyes and a stinging rebuke, reminding him he'd warned him about this already. Arngel slams his fist on the desk and roars that Orlando needs to learn basic literacy, while Orlando weakly fires back that, at minimum, he can write his own name. Frustration finally snaps. Arngel yanks Orlando by the cravat and demands to know why he's slacking, especially after Orlando's seen Lloyd and everyone else locked in studying. He leans in, blurting, "For God's sake, we don't have time, so I'll read only the important parts." And Arngel fires back, asking if Orlando really wants to get smacked, until he catches himself, apologizes fast, and meekly admits sweetly that he loves him. Their focus snaps to a report about a brand new species, and Arngel can't swallow the idea that it wiped out the old Iron Hell Goblin colony all by itself. Yet Orlando, all pensive, swears it had to be that exact creature. He digs up the assessment again. Sure, they slapped it with disaster class because the damage hasn't gone big yet, but the truth is chilling. That strange creature isn't even at its top level, and just how it looks screams that bigger destruction is on the way. Greed flares in Orlando's eyes as a bigger fight looms. He flashes a greedy grin and vows that once conflict erupts, the bounty will skyrocket, and the Daybreak Battlefield unit will be the one to snatch the prize. Arngel can't help it. His commander's greedy greed drags out a tired sigh, and he mutters that Orlando practically has money stamped on his face. Orlando tries to laugh it off, straight up admitting they still want the money. Then Arngel throws his hands on his hips and snaps that he's had enough, demanding Orlando rein in his warmongering before it gets worse. He snaps back into action, revealing that their money is bleeding out because they keep buying swords to fight this new species. Then he leans on Orlando to grab a few solid requests to help train the fresh recruits, and Orlando nods and agrees. His face hardens fast, because yeah, they've upgraded their weapons, but mages are still painfully scarce, not just in numbers, but in skill too. And now he can't stop wondering, is there anywhere in this world where it's not like this? His frustration hits max as he yells, asking if there's even a stunning, top-tier mage out there who doesn't need a single coin. Then that face, that exact woman, flashes in his mind. Arngel lets out a tired sigh and basically confirms it. Even the kingdom of Caesarea can't seem to find mages like that. Orlando recoils in shock as Arngel stays cool and calmly declares he's going to tell their conversation to a woman named Annie. And Orlando stammers to himself that a hot chick with a huge bust would be the perfect bonus. Arngel's grin turns sharp as he mutters to himself, "Why indeed?" And right before he bluntly fires the question at Orlando about why she even came up in the first place, he lets it hang in the air. That direct question detonates a flustered panic in Orlando. His face twists with pure stress, while Arngel grins and blurts, like it's the best idea ever, that the tavern keeps a bottle of 200-year-old Randall that could wipe his memory clean, and Orlando practically screams in disbelief at the price they're hinting at. Right then, Annie strides in with a bright grin, asking what's going on and whether Orlando's been treating them right. Orlando's crushed. He slumps against the desk and mumbles out a hollow "thank you" to Arngel, who looms over him and proudly declares that he'll take care of everyone. Orlando blurts a furious shriek of protest, but Annie and two other gathered soldiers drown it out with jubilant cheers, and Annie beams that, yep, the captain really is treating them. While everyone else throws a party, Arngel just stands there with a smug grin, jabs Orlando, and snaps that he's done with endless orders, especially with costs piling up, because this is exactly what happens when you slack off. Uno's monstrous, white-armored shape bursts into view, and his sudden arrival slams terror into the bandits below, faces contorting in shock as screams of alarm explode from their mouths. It's pure carnage, bloody bodies everywhere, all because they dared to defend the caravan. Thanos watches the bandits melt into panic, and even though he can't make sense of their words, their shock at seeing him is crystal clear. Wyden thrusts his eyes wide as he hits Canaan, right on the scene of a brutal attack. The coachmen and guards are sprawled dead, and a blonde woman lies hurt on the ground while the bandits scramble in chaos, yelling over each other about what to do next. He notices the woman's torn clothes, and realizes there's some kind of padding stuffed across her chest. Staring at the brutal aftermath, he clasps his hands in a hushed prayer for the fallen, thanking them for every hard moment, and sends them off with a wish for peace, while he keeps the rest of his thoughts locked away. That quick, sacred calm gets ripped apart when he realizes the bandits haven't run. One charges, and his blade snaps uselessly on Uno's armor, jolting even that massive beast. Total confusion hits him as the bandits swarm in, yelling accusations in his face, demanding to know if he's some goblin leader, and shouting for each other to strike. Once he decided, his arm sliced through the air in a thunderous strike, targeting one of the aggressors. He decides he's done playing nice. Against these bandits, he holds nothing back, and when his fist slams into a man's head, it detonates into a brutal spray of gore. He struck with brutal precision, steamrolling past the bandit screams as one of them got impaled through the chest. Blow after blow, blood bursting into the air, and he already knew there was no way they could run anymore. He couldn't stop himself anymore. Then he exploded through the air, just a streak of white armor, while the last men broke and scattered, and one guy even slammed his knees into the mud, begging him to stop with his face twisted in pure, helpless terror. The bandit dropped to his knees. Then, out of nowhere, a strange memory jolted in. A smiling, bespectacled woman in a classroom, and her exact advice from her own mentor: always strike first, because you should take the initiative and get on people's nerves. He nodded like it burned into his bones. Yeah, sensei, and the thought hit him with grim, final certainty. With that grim mantra fueling his every move, he drove his bladed arm down in a brutal arc like he'd finally decided. This is the moment he ends. After the slaughter, his thoughts snapped into place. He realized his inspiration wasn't magic at all. He stared at an adult magazine with the exact same woman, and for a split second he told himself, "That's my sensei, the one I owe everything to." Then he caught himself, because every real teacher he'd had was a man. He stood in the middle of the carnage, bandits ripped apart, bodies scattered across the forest floor like trash. A guttural growl tore out of him. Gafu. He surveyed the scene and realized it was the same old disaster. He'd gone too far again, because even though they were bandits who'd slaughtered people, they were still human, and he couldn't stop himself. He told himself it was a win-win from Kanan's side, sparing everyone the mess of a trial. With his thoughts finally settled, he strode up to the caravan he'd saved, eyed the giant sack of salt like a fair reward for beating back those bandits, grabbed it, and paid back the meal with a warm, simple thank you. His move hit like a nightmare, and the caravan's survivors erupted into terror, screaming that he was a monster, that they were all about to die, and one desperate soul even tried to copy his earlier sound like it might save them. Uno breaks away from the caravan and charges on solo, hiking the jagged rocky trail as it snakes straight through a dense, shadowy forest. His face lights up with pure, unbelievable joy, wide smile blazing as his lips curl into a heart shape. Then it hits, his grin makes sense now. He scored 2 massive jars packed to the brim with salt. He slumps down and stews over it. No matter how many wagons he'd nabbed, the rest of the spoils were flat-out disappointing. And after living on nothing but dried meat for ages, he can barely contain himself as he's ready to cook up every delicious new thing with his prize. He eyeballed the other stuff he grabbed too, stuffing some wool into a plain water jug to cushion his precious salt jars. He'd been brimming with hope the moment he saw the jug, stuffed inside a fancy box with an over-the-top design, so he instantly figured it had to be some kind of magic treasure. After he tried everything, it still did absolutely nothing, so he figured he'd at least use it as a water jug, until he checked and found a hole in the bottom, staring at it in disbelief like, "How did I miss this before?" He figures it out. Whatever it was meant for back then, it's pointless to him now. Then he spots the clue and goes, "It must have just been part of Fountain's statue," and with a sharp realization, he flicks it aside. He sprawled on the ground, staring at the glass jars like one wrong bump will shatter them. Wool padding or not, that fear has hunted him through every mile of travel. By morning, he's determined to hunt down a sturdier container for the salt at the Airquell shopping mall. He replays his recent sprinting between Canaan, the Empire, and Einhell, and if the future keeps demanding this kind of travel, he knows he'll need options fast. So he decides that setting up a real base in the Empire is the smart, strategic play. He lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling, spinning the idea of a base in his head. Then the more he thought about it, the more genius it became, like fate snapping into place. And once he pictured packing it with the essentials, he knew it would be worth every second, so he shot upright, fueled and locked in, ready to swear it was a brilliant idea. His excitement kept climbing, because it felt like he was constructing a secret hideout from scratch, pure, childish joy lighting up his chest. reminding him that deep down he was still just a normal guy who loved stuff like this. He started breaking down the logistics for real, hunting for the perfect spot. Then he realized a place near both Einhell and Canaan would be thick with woods and a terrible call, so he nailed it in his mind. Somewhere north of Idris, or right near it, would be just right. As night rolled in and a crescent moon climbed the sky, he locked in his plans, already bracing for the chaos waiting for him tomorrow. The next morning he pushed onward, that massive salt jar thumping on his back and dragging his pace just a little. And as Idris drew closer, it hit him. He'd finally come home. Deep in the thick forest, he suddenly slammed to a stop, letting out a puzzled grunt as something in the shadows caught his eye. He squinted hard, convinced he'd spotted a color in the woods that absolutely didn't belong, and when he wondered if it was some cursed artifact, he pushed closer, only for the trees to keep swallowing his view, even when he tried to zoom in. I stared through the scope and zeroed in on that distant anomaly. Then he snapped into motion, sprinting through the undergrowth to investigate. He burst through the foliage, and the moment he saw what was ahead, panic snapped across his face. He skidded to a stop, cold sweat pouring down his skin, because no matter how he tried to dodge it, he couldn't. And the horrifying thought hit him like a punch as he stared straight at what lay ahead. He'd found it right there, shoved awkwardly between the thick trees. A stark white building rose like a mistake, all sharp modern blocks that didn't belong in the wild. And that's when the dread hit. He recognized it, and his gut sank because he knew exactly why it felt so wrong. Uno storms forward with heavy, unbreakable steps, and his mind snaps. This modern, boxy place is wedged in overgrown vines, and it hits him like a jolt. It's the exact facility from the day he first woke up. He's standing in the wreckage of a lab that's gone to pieces, shattered containment pods scattered across the floor, trying not to think about it, but knowing in his bones this was where his nightmare started. To keep pretending he didn't know the truth about where he came from, until now, when he finally uncovered it. A thunderous stomp echoes as he strides straight for the entrance, his resolve locking in like steel. Meanwhile, at Karnesh Fortress in the old Imperial lands, Gister paces the battlements, looming over the soldiers below, grinning to herself as she plots storming a massive stronghold just to wipe out goblins. On the fortress's past, Conan once owned it, but the Empire seized it for ages and then she clocks it. This isn't just any fortress. Memory slams into her like a wrecking ball, one brutal battle after another, a monster detonating in a violent burst of gore right in the middle of the fight. Right now, she slumps against the window frame, brows knotted, jaw tight. She admits to herself she only took this job for the paycheck, and the moment from the past slams into her mind so hard that's exactly why she swore she never wanted to come back here. Frustration detonates. This whole mess is that monster's fault. Ever since he dragged himself to Canaan, she's been stuck crossing the border the legal way, bleeding extra money just to get through. She's fuming when a voice she knows way too well cuts in from behind. "Yo, Nachan." And she whips around, stunned, to see her brother coming at her. Gister, face set like stone, leaned in and fired a provocative question at the soldiers. How much for an eye? The facade shattered, and she erupted in a furious scream, blaming the same cruel fate that haunts every single one of them. She spun away from the two men and snapped that the queen wasn't some fortress sitting ahead, then barked at them to go find another place to lose their urges, until one soldier shouted back, "Are you ignoring me?" She stood there in dead silence while the soldiers huddled and argued. One bragged about her nerve, but the other spotted a crest on her staff, slamming the truth. She was a mage from the Kenishita clan of Caesarea. Then they hit her with a blunt, unimpressed question, was there anything else? That shock hit the man like a bolt of fear, because in Caesarea's magic nation, everyone knew the Kenishita and Itsu clans were freakishly powerful. Getting a name like that wasn't a fluke. It meant she carried terrifying strength. And when one of them finally spoke, you could hear his breath catch. Thank goodness they hadn't been burnalized. Even with danger snapping at their heels, that one soldier couldn't look away. His eyes latched onto her sultry face like it was a trap he couldn't resist, while his partner grabbed him by force and hissed, "Get a grip." Right then, a projectile ripped out of the distance and nailed the distracted soldier straight in the forehead, dead on impact, while his friend stood there, stunned and horrified. The next morning, the fight kicked into full gear. Masses of mages surged forward, and the second soldier got dropped hard, screaming for his fallen partner as his final breath left him. As chaos erupted all around her, Gister snapped into her incantation and screamed, then blasted a roaring barrage of massive fireballs straight toward the enemy fortress. The spell slammed into the ramparts and detonated like a god-tier bomb, blasting the air apart with a colossal explosion. Then Gister finally exhaled, and the next mage just stared in stunned silence, realizing she wasn't in the same league and probably wiped out 100 enemies already. She tells the soldier, Orlando, that her magic is completely drained and she has to retreat. And when he thanks her, she snaps that he can't call her master, because that title drags up a disgusting memory from her past. Orlando goes quiet, wrestling with what she just said. She whirled around and marched off across the wooden platform, cutting him loose and leaving him standing there alone. He yells after her, furious that mercenaries never can be trusted since they're always hunting for the quickest escape. Yeah, he knows running out of magic happens, but the frustration still burns, and all she gets is a quick, annoyed glance back. A knight from the local army barges in and snaps orders to keep the fortress damage low, since they're planning to reuse it, stomping all over the simpler idea of torching it. Gister huffs under her breath, muttering that this kind of meddling is exactly why she'd been so hesitant to take the job. She keeps muttering about the nobles, rolling her eyes as if they're all cut from the same cloth, always whining, never risking a single thing, and deep down she can't deny it. She's jealous of how effortless their lives look. Her gaze snaps back to the battlements, and as she paces the wall, she realizes the goblins have burned out their momentum way faster than she thought. Good, because if they'd been armed with the Empire's weapons, this would have turned into a full-on nightmare. With the invaders locking down the outer walls, the first stage of the siege wrapped up in the blink of an eye. When the main gate finally yawned open and the rear guard got shoved inside, only the Goblin Queen and a few trembling attendants remained. Orlando stood his ground with his greatsword lifted high, ready to crash straight into the Queen herself. With a feral grin, he slams the massive blade down in a roaring arc, and dark blood sprays across the stone floor in a violent burst. She stares at the brutal carnage, jaw dropping in stunned awe. Then the Goblin Queen's legs are smashed to pieces, leaving her helpless as arrows rain in and she's cut down fast. The fight to take back Karnash Fortress ended in a total knockout victory. Messy, hard-earned, but somehow remarkably clean. Just 5 dead and 65 wounded, while the fortress itself barely even got bruised. While the soldiers are out there celebrating, one loud knight laugh rings out. He's bragging that the Lord will be thrilled with those top-notch instructions. Gister watches with pure disgust, sneering that it's all high and mighty, even though he's the one who just held him back. As she scoffs, Orlando closes in with a wide grin and starts praising her amazing performance. Then his men shoot dirty thoughts, imagining her in a far less professional way. He flushes as it hits him. His words landed harder than he meant, and the tension among his troops goes razor-thin. So he scrambles backward, claiming he was only talking about her work, not her at all, and Gister just lets out a loud, exasperated sigh. Orlando steadies himself and, like a captain stepping into the spotlight, formally introduces himself as the leader of the Daybreak battlefield crew, while the blonde kid beside him pipes up that he's Lloyd, also from Daybreak. Then the word work finally snaps Gister's attention. He wastes zero time and straight up tells her, clear as day, that he's here to hire her. Her annoyance snaps into razor-sharp focus, and she leans in to ask, has he heard the rumors about a brand new species of monster? He confirms her suspicions on the spot, admitting he's got history with that monster himself. Orlando then tells her he's expecting to get drafted into an extermination mission any day, but his mage ranks are thin, and the quality just isn't there. And he makes it clear, with her skills, they'd finally have the edge they need. His words hit her like a bolt, and suddenly she's hooked. Because the way he talks, there's a personal history with this creature, and that sparks her curiosity fast. Her calm snaps into steel. Her eyes lock on him as she demands fiercely that he spill every detail. A silent, blocky facility squats under a partly cloudy sky, white walls glaring through dense foliage, looking completely abandoned, like a relic ripped straight from a dead era. Inside, Uno freezes, eyes locked on the open elevator door, sweat pounding down his armored brow as he blurts out in disbelief. How is the gate wide open when it's supposed to be sealed? He tells them exactly how he found this place. He slipped in through a jagged hole in the outer wall, and then he leans over the elevator shaft, squinting down into it like, wait, this isn't that deep. But then, his eyes lock on a second hole right in the shaft wall, and the edges look like they're melting away. His eyes snapped upward, and there it was. The elevator's ceiling was melted through, too. Then he looked down at his own hand, and the shock hit. Sticky on his skin was the substance he'd been staring at, threads. Then it clicked. This was the hidden lair of that spider-like monster he'd been hunting for days. He hauls himself down into the basement through a cramped elevator shaft, then stops cold, because another gate sits wide open, waiting for him. From the dark, he freezes his senses on the High Lord, so faint he can barely make out the sound of movement. Suddenly, everything clicks. Of course, the gate was never opened in the first place. The spider creature popped it open as it left. That can only mean one thing: the facility's power generator is still running. Turns out my guess is right, because the second he steps deeper inside, he spots Gear quietly pumping out electricity by siphoning the groundwater. So with his theory nailed, he wastes no time digging into what's really going on. A machine that's still powered up, siphoning information with total confidence. Its non-stop running is proof that the Empire's tech was built to last. He inspects the old facility and grimly clocks the truth. Those power generators will sputter out in roughly 300 days. Still, right now it's gold. The thick underground build keeps most monsters out, and he can stretch a tiny trickle of electricity. So for the moment, he parks the panic and decides to deal with extending the power later. With a victory jolt, he roars that this place is about to become the Empire Stronghold's secret base. His thoughts snap to the next job. Before he even settles in, he charges to Alquil to snag a few items, then carefully packs a handful of glass bottles into his backpack. Elsewhere, an elf woman with flowing, pale hair sinks into a calm pool, relaxing in total peace. A tiny white creature crouched in the bushes watched her in total silence, swearing to itself that it was only there to keep tabs on the elves, until the elf woman's instincts snapped, and she spotted two mischievous elf kids nearby. One of the elf boys catches her eye and brag shouts that he's got a fish. He flips his prize up in the air for her to see, and her mouth drops in pure amazement. Right when the playful moment feels harmless, the fish slams right onto her head. She jerks in shock, and before she can even recover, another elf boy darts in from behind and yanks away the cloth she'd been using to hide. They pull it off and bolt with her covering, laughing like they've won the world, while she's left panicking, crying out for them to give it back. The prank ends with the elf woman snapping at the kids, who finally fold, completely subdued. And from the bushes, that tiny white creature flashes a thumbs up, grinning like, "Yeah, we're getting better," already itching for the next prank. Uno watched the whole thing from afar, and it hit him hard. Being from the Empire meant his feelings were tangled, but seeing them up close made one thing clear. Elves aren't that different from humans, and maybe building a real connection with them wouldn't be such a bad idea. He starts seeing why getting close to the elves could be a huge win. Those long lifespans might still carry the truth about what happened 200 years ago. But then reality hits hard. There's one problem he can't crack. He can't understand a word of their language. Deciding not to rush a thing, he turned around and headed back to the Empire, for now. And that tiny slime bounced along, gleeful, as he quietly admitted the real reason he came here wasn't nearly as strategic as he'd hoped. Meanwhile, in the Canaan Kingdom, the massive, grand administrative building of Rico looms like the center of everything. Inside, Arngil studies the document, and with every line, tension claws at his face until fatigue finally drags him down. He lets out a heavy sigh at his desk when a sharp knock hits the door. Then he tells them to come in, and a long-braided man steps inside, asking what's wrong. Captain Marcus, the Golden Ember mercenary leader, steps in and says he can already feel those orange ears, and the foul mood, hanging in the air even before the door opens. Arngil confirms his fears. There's a fresh extermination order targeting a new species, and it's going down as a joint operation with the local army, while Marcus just listens, unsurprised, like he knew it would end here eventually. He grills the timing, too soon for some wild order from the kingdom, until Marcus shuts him down with the facts. From his intel, this new species has only struck a merchant convoy, and the dead were just bandits. Arngil finally spills the real reason behind it all, the Lord's pride, revealing the new species didn't just steal anything. They grabbed a replica of the Seawater source, a symbolic relic meant to kickstart a brand new town being built in the south. His fist trembles with raw rage as fury boils over. How can the nobility not care that mercenaries are being thrown at an unknown enemy with barely any info, just for something so pointless? Marcus can't believe the country's politics, and Arngil starts roaring. If the high-risk job pulls off, the local army gets the credit. But if it goes wrong, the mercenaries eat every bit of the blame. He offers an apology, but Marcus snaps up his hand and tells him, "Don't you dare blame yourself." Still, no matter what Arngil throws at the situation, the mercenary captain draws a hard line. His crew, the Golden Ember, isn't touching his business. Standing before Arngil's desk, he lays out his choice with zero hesitation, because he doesn't care what happens to himself. Only that, as captain, he's the one guarding the younger crew's lives. Arngil nods and admits he'd do the very same thing if the roles were flipped. The captain's face hardens into something grim. He'd kill for every mercenary crew to say no, but daybreak. the operation code name, demands participation, no exceptions. And he figures, yeah, they're the only ones who have already fought this new species, so there's basically no other option. Elsewhere, the news of the mandatory operation detonates in pure chaos. Orlando and his spiky-haired comrades stare in disbelief, and Orlando blurts that if Daybreak is in on it, then Grant from Immovable won't be able to stay silent, because Grant always can't help trying to outdo that one specific person. Back in the office, Marcus leans in and figures, with a talent like that on the team, maybe it'll all work out after all. But Arngil doesn't buy it for a second. He shuts it down flat, saying he's not so sure. With a bone-deep, world-weary sigh, he keeps going, saying that the older you get, the harder it gets to pretend you're brave because fear starts creeping in. His eyes go distant, and he leans in, asking Arngil if what he's feeling could be the whispers of that land. Because even though he's never seen it with his own eyes, he can still feel it breathing in the air. Right then, that presence pushes through a thick, forbidden forest, way past what humans should ever touch, while Uno barrels ahead with one blazing thought driving him forward, using Boob's power to surge on. Just as morning hits, his eyes flutter open, then a voice slides in and wakes him up. He snaps his eyes around, and there's the elf teacher, Miss Six, sprawled right beside him. Then she lets out a teasing chuckle, thrilled that he's finally awake to his total disbelief. He leans in, grinning as he jabs a finger and points out that his little friend has been huge the whole time, and Uno's face instantly erupts into pure, mortified embarrassment. Suddenly, he rockets out of bed with a triumphant roar, thrilled his tail is back. Then he grins and flexes, his partner's relieved expression lighting up as everything finally feels right again. His excitement suddenly fades as he lowers his gaze, muttering, "It all makes sense now," like the realization just hit him. He relived the whole day before, how he'd sprinted at full throttle straight to Urkel, and the moment it hit him, pure exhaustion crashed over him so hard he dropped into bed, realizing his body had never felt this utterly wiped out in its life. After catching his breath, Uno slipped through the storage area and quickly stacked up the essentials, grabbing a plastic container, a scrubber, dishware, and salt like he had a plan. He sifted through the home appliances, and the math was brutal. Anything that demanded steady electricity, like a refrigerator, would basically be dead on arrival. Then he drops onto a huge television and just stares, remembering how he's always dreamed of watching movies on a screen this massive. Because honestly, he can't deny it. He needs some entertainment right now. Right after that thought hits, practical worry crashes in. He starts wondering if any data disks he might stumble across will still work. He grabs one of his spoils, a dusty video camera, and stares at it like it's a relic from his old world. That device sparks a gut-punch realization. If he uses a video camera, he can record certain kinds of scenes, even intimate ones, and suddenly the image of the elf teacher hits him like a flashbulb. He trembles, electric fear ripping through him at the thought those recordings could survive forever, while some smaller, quieter part of his mind jerks back, screaming that voyeurism is a crime. His thoughts explode like a battlefield. An angelic voice screams that using the Empire's greatest invention this way is wrong and disingenuous, while a devilish voice snaps back that Einhell has no laws against secret filming because video cameras don't even exist there, and the argument tears him apart. His jaw tightens to the point of pain, his face hardening like steel, and he decides, this line is one no human must ever dare to cross. Just like that, joy hits him. He isn't human, so of course it's allowed. His inner demon throws a victory party for the loophole, while his better angel collapses in despair. With the moral storm finally settling, he steps up to a stash of cameras, swearing the Empire's tech brilliance will light up the elves. Again, but this time secretly. He tears through the shelves, but the one thing he wants is nowhere. So he grabs the catalog, spots the latest model with zoom and a bunch of functions, and his hopes rocket, until he realizes it's sold out, and it isn't hiding anywhere in the back room either. He flashes on the idea of taking his second choice, then snaps it off. No compromise, period. A map pops open and points to a brand new destination, reachable only by passing through a town that got rich on weapon factories and also happens to be famous for its electronics district. Grinning at his brand new TV and disc player, he pumps his fist and vows he'll run as far as it takes for lewdness, then turns back to his base to hook up the TV first, leaving that pesky goblin business on the back burner for now. He finally slammed into the town of Jisvia, grinning as he took in the sprawling industrial skyline. His face set like stone with pure resolve. After trekking this far, losing the camera now would be a gut punch. He begged the universe, praying it would be right there. His hopeful search got cut short the second he spotted it, Under the traffic lights, a brutalized orc hung there, blood-soaked and horribly beaten, like a warning carved in terror. Out of nowhere, a shadowy, terrifying figure slammed into his path, landing like it owned the world. Then it let out a sharp warning. This was its territory, and anyone who trespassed would meet the same brutal end. With a blur of pure violence, the creature's kick smashed into Uno and sent him stumbling backward, staggering across the ground. Then he clocked it. A red ogre, smarter and built on a whole other level than any regular ogre. He knew the second this creature crashed his search for the camera, everything would go sideways, and that set him off. Annoyance flared, he squared his shoulders, and with a sharp breath he said, "All right then, fine, bring it on." Their fists slammed together with a thunderclap, and Uno's foot skidded back from the raw force, something that almost never happened. And right then, excitement hit him hard. This was the first time he'd ever gone toe-to-toe with someone this powerful, the kind of opponent he could finally spar with in a real, no-holds-barred fight. The red ogre surged forward and slammed a bone-crushing punch right into Uno's head, driving him flying for real. Another brutal kick slammed him, and the red ogre's foot pinned Uno in place. Right then, everything snapped into focus. This wasn't just a bout, it was a fight to the death, and Uno vowed he wouldn't hold a single grudge. He swallowed the grim truth and swung back, fist first, brutal and exact, cracking straight through the red ogre's chest. And when Uno's follow-up slammed in, the creature erupted into a sickening spray, and the whole fight was over in an instant. He'd barely cut down the last threat when a hulking, ogre-like monster towered over him, and the thing swung its club hard, slam, downward with brutal force. So Luno snapped up his armored forearm to block it. The hit landed like a nightmare, crunch. As the club exploded against his arm, and a sickening spill of dark fluid splattered across the ground. Even after the hit came crashing down, Uno's body didn't flinch, unharmed. He stared at the corpse in front of him and saw the skull caved in, like the attack never even stood a chance. He flexed his hand and smirked, telling himself the punch did sting, but the damage vanished instantly. It started this fight, he thought, so it was already doomed. Then tiny angel and demon thoughts drifted into view, and Uno sat at the water's edge, mulling it all over. If he could survive that, then maybe he really was about to become the strongest thing on land. With every future worry biting at the edges, Uno stormed into the store. Mission locked in, charging straight for a top-tier video camera. He kept scanning the displays until his eyes snapped to the perfect prize, a huge pro-grade camera sitting inside a glass case. The search paid off, and pure joy exploded in him as he celebrated the discovery with unrestrained glee. He decided to hunt down some movie discs too, and he singled out one he couldn't wait to watch. Then he grabbed 2 cameras of the same model and stocked up on 50 blank discs for recording, fully confident his filming plans were finally locked in. He shuffled into an aisle packed with endless discs, and the sheer mountain of choices hit him like a wave, overwhelmed. His hesitation snapped in half the second. He spotted a curtained nook labeled 18, and its undeniable pull grabbed him by the collar. An unseen power yanked it into view. Then Uno slipped past the curtain and vanished into the restricted area. The shopping spree ended with a fat haul, 2 video cameras, 50 blank discs, and 3 movie discs. But when the dust settled, the final count blew everyone away. 50 18 discs, and every single one translated and delivered. Cowering behind the towering pile of his purchases, Uno tried to talk his way out, starting with, "The gravure idol I like moved into this field," then yanking it back fast, insisting it was just a test to see if the discs even worked because the genre doesn't matter. He kneels before his fresh acquisitions, practically bursting to start watching, but he forces himself to play it proper, because rushing would be rude to the actress, and he wants her full attention. With that settled, he decides it. First he eats. Outside, a huge cut of meat hisses over a crackling fire, and he plans to cook every last bit before he's done. He then plates the steak like a masterpiece on the fancy tableware he'd picked up earlier in Urquell, and with a dramatic flourish, he drowns it in his special seasoning, cane and salt. That's it, the meal's done. Uno-style deer steak, aka pure grilled goodness, sizzling and glistening right there on the plate. Without even pausing, he digs in and devours a huge, mouth-watering bite of steak. He savors every bite, gushing about how juicy the meat is and how insane the salt tastes. Then it hits him. Once you taste this, bland food is officially dead to you. When he's done, he steps up to the metal sink and thanks the meal like it's a miracle. And then he can't help thinking that if he loads it up with spices to bury that gamey smell, it'll taste even better. Then he twists the faucet and fires the question at an unseen audience. Did you catch it? The tap finally coughs up water and it starts pouring out. His eyes lock onto this futuristic marvel, and he points out that the place runs on more than electricity. It's got running water, too. While he scrubs his plate clean, he can't help but marvel at how much of a lifesaver this is. He's used to hauling water from the river, after all, and then he grins. The Empire is downright incredible. He perched on the edge of his bed, and the giant screen in front of him roared to life. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. He clamped down on his fear, sweating through his armor as that long-awaited moment finally slammed into place. His hands shook like thunder as he slid the disc into the player, and that weird tremor screamed just how badly he'd been waiting. He clasped his hands tight, eyes locked on the case beside him, and a desperate plea pounded in his head. Come on, please work. Then nothing changed, until a violent tremor ripped through him, rattling the bed beneath his weight as his hope curdled into raw, restless agitation. The shaking kept pounding on, like disbelief and raw frustration were scraping his nerves from the inside. His mind wouldn't stop racing, refusing to swallow the result. No way, he insisted, it has to work, right? But the truth hit like a hammer. He crumpled face first onto the mattress, utterly done for, staring at the wreckage of his failed attempts all around him. None of it worked. He sprawled there, totally still, and the crushing weight of his disappointment pinned him to the floor. Then a terrifying thought slammed into his despair. He jolted upright, eyes snapping to the nearby video camera. If the discs were dead weight, were the cameras doomed too? He snaps his focus to another device, a record player, praying this time things won't go wrong. When the red light blazes that it's recording, he clutches the camera and pleads in silence, begging it to at least work this time. But it all crashes right back into failure. He bellows with rage, then hammers the machine with a brutal punch, and the crunch of metal rings out like his despair. He crumples in agony, furious that the Empire's advanced tech can't back it up. So he blurts out in pure disbelief how their supposedly superior systems can't deal with humble discs that have lasted 200 years. A fresh thought slices through his fury. Maybe it's not the discs at fault, but the player itself. Panic hits, and he swears he has to get back to Urquell right now to investigate. He glares at one of the disc cases, craving a brand new player like it's on fire inside him. Then he hesitates, and a cold wave of exhaustion and doubt smashes into his chest. He clutched the discs to his chest and let their weight sink in. These weren't just objects. They were fresh hope blooming in him, a real promise of what's coming next. The idea of watching this fragile hope die sends chills down his spine, because if it gets snuffed out, he knows he could finally tumble straight into madness. His hands curl into tight fists, shaking with one brutal truth. He's clinging to the last shred of sanity with everything he's got. For now, he picks the only option left, sleep. He tucks himself in, swearing that one day, once he's strong enough to stomach the worst and still keep hope alive, he'll hunt down a new player. As sleep drags him under, his dreams spill the truth. Number 6 and number 8, two elf women, laughing and playing side by side on a sun-soaked beach. He drifts in pure bliss, his obsession floating right in front of him across the starry maze of his mind. But even in this perfect moment, a deep, crushing sorrow slips into the dream. Lunos is wrecked by everything that just happened, but he refuses to stay drowned in grief. Yet when he tries to throw himself into life at the new base, it all falls flat. Chasing a better life, he heads straight for the Canaan highway, determined to score some salt. He slinks into a hiding nook among the bushes, and right then he spots 3 wagons, dead still, like they're trapped in place with no sign of movement. He clocks the situation fast. If they can't get out, he doesn't have to stay camouflaged anymore. Bursting into the open, his sudden arrival made the 2 men by the wagons snap with terror-filled cries. They immediately whipped around and bolted in pure panic, ditching their cargo behind them. He closes in on the wagons and realizes, wait, 2 are still standing, so the men really could have packed up and gone after all. Their furious, panicked retreat feels weird, but he's not complaining. He steps in and takes the goods they left behind. Clues drag him to a tiny sack of dried meat, and the second he lifts it for a closer look, that fierce, wrong chemical stench hits him. He jerks back in disgust. A weird smell hits him and pure dread snaps into place. He jolts back as the truth lands. He's walked straight into some kind of trap. Right then, thunder of pounding hooves crashes through the air, and a sharp pair of eyes watches from afar, laser-focused on what's coming. The real source finally comes to light. Canaan Kingdom's army lines up for war, and a knight commander riding an armored steed surveys the battlefield like a hawk, realizing the mercenaries they tossed in as bait are now hopelessly outnumbered. Uno took one look at the army closing in and instantly sized up the danger. He'd completely misjudged them, because this wasn't hundreds, it was at least 300, maybe even 500 soldiers. He weighed every option, but sprinting was a dead end. It would just drag out the inevitable. He'd always known his raids in Canaan would eventually bring this storm, yet he never expected it to hit this fast and this hard. He snapped a look at the salt pot, the whole reason this showdown even exists, and tried to figure out what he could do next. Realizing his options were razor-thin, he knew he could either hold back and blast his way out, or go all in, unleash everything and slaughter the whole army. Either way, the ending felt brutally, depressingly the same. He weighed every fallout like it was a bomb with a countdown. If he pulled his punches, he'd shatter the military's honor. But if he went all out and wiped an entire army alone, the world would brand him a menace, not just a nation's problem. Either way, he had one cruel conclusion: crush them without mercy. Then he let out a heavy sigh and realized this meant Canaan was about to get a lot harder, more alerts, less wagon traffic and eyes everywhere. He finally made his choice and charged straight into the Canaan Kingdom Army's armored ranks, with their commander standing right at the front. The commander snapped their gauntlet straight at him, voice booming like a war drum, calling him a foolish monster who'd walked right into their trap, and then dared to turn the mighty Canaan Kingdom into an enemy. "Now you'll regret it," they snarled, "in hell." He took in that theatrical declaration, and a grim smile snapped onto his face as if it belonged there. Because the commander's words hit like a full-blown stage act, and in that moment he realized he'd been turning aggressive too. He straightened up, took the challenge head-on, and swore he'd meet them exactly the way they wanted, then handle whatever hit next, no matter what. In response to his acceptance, the commander shot their arm up and bellowed at the archers behind them, "Don't freeze, aim and fire." As the arrows came screaming in, Uno dug his heels in and refused to flinch. From atop his horse, the commander clocked it instantly. If they followed the boring plan, they'd lose the moment. Those arrows wouldn't punch through Uno's armored hide anyway, so the next strike would have to be carried by the mercenaries. He leads the mercenary charge, and a spiky-haired captain on horseback bellows his challenge. Then he spots Uno's a halberd wielder, drives his horse forward, and yells in pure thrill to see what this monster can really do. He slams forward to close the gap, but right as he's in striking range, his target starts a magic chant. Then the captain snaps to it, realizing this monster is going for a hit-and-run, and he swears he won't let him get away. Meanwhile, Uno is stunned by how insanely fast the captain moves, ditching his weapon and horse to pile into the fight on foot. The incantation snaps into a massive blast, slamming the charging mercenaries in a roaring cloud of smoke, and when it clears, Uno and his duplicates stand there untouched. He clocks the mage's attack like it's a letdown, almost amused by how little damage it did, then plants his feet and declares, "All right, now it's my turn." Right before he can make a move, the mercenary captain barrels out of the smoke, his halberd slashing in a huge arc that rips into Uno's side. And the monster is stunned it even connected, now wondering if the blade is enchanted or if its returning to the wielder power is something special. It grins and admits, this opponent's going to be a lot of fun. He drives in hard, unleashing a raging blur of punches that Uno can only block and parry, while the monster smirks like he's banking on it, realizing the mercenary crew is packed with battle maniacs. The fight's fun, yeah, but now he sees the bigger issue. So many enemies at once, and he starts plotting his escape. He darts aside the swing and whips a brutal sweeping hit with his armored arm, catching the captain flat-footed and blasting him through the air. Then, as the man sprawls away, Uno pauses for a split second, flashing a flicker of real admiration for that daring move. He slams onto the dusty ground, his weapons skid out of reach, and he hauls himself up on one knee as the captain locks eyes with the monster, then roars a defiant promise that it won't be allowed to slip away. He halts in his tracks, snatches up the fallen halberd, and hurls it like a cannon blast. Then it rips through the air and drives straight into the captain, skewering his chest and punching through the back of his head, killing him on the spot. Uno drops beside the fallen warrior, stands over him with zero tension, then taunts the stunned crowd, "Who's next?" and dares them, if nobody comes, he'll march straight to them. His challenge hangs there, unanswered, and the silence feels deadly. Then the Canaanite commander snaps from the command line, roaring in fury, demanding why the archers and mages aren't moving, and ordering them to hurry up and bring down the monster. On the chaos-soaked battlefield, Uno grins as the enemy mages line up in front of him, grim satisfaction blazing across his face like, finally, a real fight is about to ignite. Confidence evaporates the moment three figures break through the chaos: Orlando, Arngil, and a long-haired blonde warrior. And the sight slams Uno's with a traumatic flashback, making him flinch hard as Orlando greets him like it's no big deal and says it's been way too long. Fear and rage slam into him at once. Then he surges forward, launching a bone-crushing punch straight at Orlando. The warrior just slips aside, and Uno's fist detonates into the empty air where Orlando was about to be. Hando braces his massive sword like a shield and clicks his tongue in pure frustration. Because after their first clash, Uno figured out blocking his strikes is useless and now keeps dodging instead. Right after promising to land that punch, Uno slams his next swing with bone-crushing power. Wham! The impact should have landed, but Orlando has already slipped away, and the attack just slices through empty air. Orlando snaps back with a blazing upward slash, his blade smacking Uno's side, so hard it rattles him. Because Uno had let his guard drop, convinced they were weak only to realize, with a jolt, he'd been played and tricked into lowering his defenses. Right before Orlando can even fully breathe again, he plants his feet and demands Uno's total focus. While Canaan Kingdom soldiers crash into the area and fully ring the monstrous warrior in a tight, unbroken circle, Orlando spots the opening and yells for his archers to get ready. One moment he gets the go-ahead to fire, and Uno braces for the volley, only to freeze at the knight's brutal offbeat coordination, because they're so out of sync that one arrow just clangs off his armor like it missed on purpose. Then his focus gets yanked away as a charging blur hits full speed, blonde and reckless, right as he spots the truth. It's number 5 charging straight through friendly fire. She charges in with her magic sword already drawn, closing the distance fast, while Uno just stares, baffled by her move, because he knows blades like that never work on him. But as she gets closer, that confident smirk lands and it hits him. Something's off. Before it can land, she whips a tiny vial through the air. Then it smashes against his chest, soaking him in a vile dark spill, and right after that split-second shock, the horrifying truth hits Uno. He's been poisoned. Black coils writhe as sparks of flame blast out on impact. Then poison floods through him, a cold new power seeping into his armor while Orlando and his companions stare as it takes full hold. Orlando locks eyes with Joel, realizing a direct hit would have been catastrophic, and from far away Orlando and the blonde warrior stare down the monster. Orlando gaping at how it can bend a spell's path while she mutters that no creature like this could ever be beaten. But he doesn't fold. An unexpected jolt hits him, and he realizes the magic is the same spell from that mage earlier. A huge grin snaps onto his face, and for the first time since he got this body, pure joy finally crashes over him. So he punctuates it by smashing a Canaan soldier straight into the ground. Crashing through the terrified ranks, he declares that playtime is done and dares them to fight like their lives are on the line, only for the soldiers to shatter formation and bolt in screams, and Uno's smirk curdles as he sees it clearly. They're not ready to die, and the fun is ending way too soon. Uno watches them get swallowed by panic, realizing the Canaan army is totally hopeless. No matter how the commanders scream for calm and regroup, their cries get drowned out by the tide of fear. Right when his disappointment hits its breaking point, a fresh presence roars onto the battlefield. Then a soldier bellows his lords, names in pure relief as the fully armored Canaanite commander, riding a warhorse, thunders in to lend his support. The commander's grand entrance doesn't land at all. Before he can even bask, his own knight gets smothered by a swarm of panicked men. With the kingdom's army shoved away, Uno snaps his focus to another knot of fighters on the field, roaring at them to stop fooling around. He pauses for a beat, his armored body hissing out steam from the strain, and from way off the blonde elf woman locks in on the unfolding chaos, sweat beading on her brow as she steadies her breath. Once the decision hits, he explodes forward and slams the gap to the mercenaries in an instant. Then he sees the monster move, and Orlando roars, "I'm going in!" while his companions snap to it and follow his command. He slams into Orlando, greatsword up, like he's already reading the fight map, and before he can even blink, Orlando's holding him in place while the others strike back. Right on cue, another mercenary whips a brutal blade at his side, and he has to snap into a hard block as the coordinated assault finally detonates. Endures the mercenary's coordinated assault, the blonde warrior suddenly catching a gap. She yells that she can see him. Then her axe slams into his armored body as another mercenary lunges in from the side, and Orlando just watches, jaw tight with tension. The attack after attack comes up empty. Then, in the blink of an eye, he's the only one left standing, hemmed in by the bodies of his fallen attackers, and a furious curse rips from his mouth. He finally gulps a breath and realizes he'd been holding back everything, like there weren't many truly dead, and the ones who fell were just crushed by bad luck. A brutal cough tears through him as he stares at the chaos and prays the fight is finally over. That thought gets crushed instantly. The air snaps with raw magical power as a gigantic crystal bolt rockets toward him, and a woman's furious scream tears through the sky. A hulking crystal crashes into the earth right in front of him, exploding the ground on impact. He freezes, stunned by the raw, brutal power of that spell. The scene snaps away into a cold, gut-punch dread. He registers with terror just how close he'd come to dying, because one direct hit from that would have ripped his head clean off. His eyes snap to the attack's source, and there, a whole squad of mages crumple in exhaustion. He's stunned because after their last encounter, he can't fathom how that Manhwa woman still has that much magic left. He realizes she's burned through every last drop of magic. Now she can't even hide anymore, and she's sprawled on the ground, fully exposed, while his eyes snap to her striking features. Now that the danger's vanished, curiosity grabs him by the collar, so he decides he might as well go take a good look at her face. He slowly closes in on the downed mage, drops to his knees before her defenseless form, and out in the distance Orlando can't help watching, anguish wrecking his expression. He lunged downward, his massive hand clamping onto the exhausted mage's chest, lifting her like she weighed nothing, while her gasp burst out before she could even process how close that grip was. As she fought in his grip, she revealed her secret weapon, a hidden magic dagger, and refused to quit. Uno's feet were occupied by a tiny, pale creature that practically reveled in her resistance, urging her to keep struggling because it only made her chest bounce, which it found insanely delightful, and the slime creature chimed in too, saying it just didn't get Caesarean happiness. The creatures erupted in pure delight, calling it incredible, then completely ignored them as if he didn't matter. As he gripped the mage, a weird wave of recognition hit him, and he was sure he'd felt this exact same rush before somehow. Jester clung to that grip like it mattered, and a shy blush flared across her face as the little creature kept staring up at her in pure awe, because that moment felt so close to something she'd lived before, right on the edge of memory. Jester's smile snapped into a hard glare, too late. A memory clicked into place with brutal clarity, and Uno's eyes went wide as recognition hit. She was the same woman from the ogre fight, the one he'd only ever labeled as a peasant. In Caesarea, a lone figure drops to their knees and prays, with everything they've got before the towering altar of a grand church. She's a woman of the cloth, her hands clenched tight as she pours every ounce of her focus into one deep, solemn prayer. Prayer is troubled. She can't stop thinking about her brother in Gista, and a nasty dread keeps crawling over her until a bead of sweat slides down her temple. Right there, a brutal brawl rages as Gister, the magina-haired mage, gets pinned in the monstrous Uno's iron grip, screaming for someone to protect Daira. The pressure snaps to someone else. Right there, he spots the blonde elf, a peasant, and even though her face slips his memory, her bold physique and the way she speaks Caesarea hit him instantly. No question about it, it's her. With the memory of that sword in her hands, she showed him the way. He can't shake it. If she's hunting him all the way to Canaan, then her real target has to be that expensive-looking blade. He flicked his eyes over the gathered Canaanites, and right away, their lack of drive screamed at him. He'd survived his last run-in only because he swiped a magic potion from a paysan, and now he swears that debt has to pay back more than saving her life. So with that excuse, Uno whips around and bolts into the forest, still dragging Gister along while she shrieks for him to let her go. Yet the knights only stare as he disappears, one of them grinning and muttering that trading one female mercenary is a bargain. Their captain is furious at their cowardice. He charges straight at them, roaring that they're utterly useless, then barks that they'd better clean up the mess while they scramble back. As she's dragged away, Gister whips her head back, terror slamming into her chest. Then a brutal thought hits. Maybe that thing is hunting human women for a predator's hunger. She yells at the top of her lungs, sure it's coming to devour her. She thrashes against her captor, her voice roaring with defiance. She spits that she'll never break for a monster, then dares him to kill her if that's what he truly wants. Uno eases her down to the ground, and just like that her fight dies out. She stares up at the giant, silent figure, totally stunned that everything turned so fast. She stares him down, panic and plans flying through her head, and she decides. He looks distracted, but she has to find a weapon fast. She can act like a pro. The armored creature drags itself down into a slow kneel before her, its massive bulk towering over her in brutal contrast. He cracks open his big hand, and there it is, a tiny, ornate sword sitting snug in his palm. Juster just freezes, eyes wide with pure shock and disbelief, while UNOS lets out a quiet little sound and pushes the weapon toward her. She hesitates for a beat, then snatches it up, taking the hill. Sword in hand, her confidence rockets back. She swings it up with a smug, triumphant smirk, itching for a fight. Yet Uno doesn't even twitch. Right to her shock, he just turns his back and strides off like nothing happened. Her smirk dies on her face, replaced by total confusion as she can't even make sense of it. She's furious at what he's doing, and as he backs away, she yells, "You don't get to treat humans like toys." Her words slam into deaf ears, and Uno just barrels on, heading straight into a shallow river like he doesn't even hear her, not once looking back. Deep in the hush of the forest, Uno sits alone on a fallen log, staring at a tiny fire that crackles in front of him, flames dancing as he roasts fish over a rough, makeshift setup. His thoughts slip away from the crackling fire, and boom, he's hit with a warm memory of that blonde elf woman, remembering her kindness and whispering to himself how incredible she truly was. Then the memory snaps over to Gister, the Medjana-herd mage. He can't help but admit her presence lifts his spirits, even as he realizes she's probably gone the other way by now. He cups his own monstrous face, and this wild wave of awe hits him, because he finally gets it. Humanity can't forgive someone like him, and it's only because he used to be human too. A sharp flash of his recent clash with Gista hits him. Yeah, it was fun, even felt like a real workout. But the thought makes him pause because calling a genuine battle fun just feels wildly wrong. Clenches his armored fist and admits his power is too wild to earn forgiveness. Yet a tiny part of him still clings to hope like it won't let go. A wild image of the future ignites in his mind, living among humans even in his monster skin. Then it gets real. He sees himself hauling a brutal, heavy log through a village while people stare, and the big question hits him hard: could a future like that ever actually exist? Let out a quiet sigh, so faint it barely cut through the crackle of the fire. For now, he lets the thoughts slide away, then looks up at the moonlit sky. Time to eat. He pushes himself to his feet, fueled by fresh purpose. As he devours his meal, he snaps into strategy mode, thinking that last fight has to have lit a fire under Canaan, making them beef up patrols and tighten supply lines, so he needs to lay low away from the kingdom for now. Then it hits him. The scramble ripping through their information network is exactly the kind of opening he's been waiting for. Under the crescent moon, he slams down with a brutal thud, and by morning his mind is made up. He'll unleash his final move. Under the same sky, Jester stays deadly calm as she cradles a tiny, crude effigy, staring at her handiwork like she's solving a puzzle no one else can see. After the fight, Arngel's voice slices right through the chaos. He orders his soldiers to haul the seriously wounded into the carriages, while the ones with minor injuries get ready to move. Then he snaps his focus to Orlando. Annie is checking him over, and she shoots him a worried look. "You okay?" But he waves her off, saying this is nothing compared to what they've already survived. Even with Orlando's cold, dismissive words hanging in the air, his face stayed locked in grim resolve as Arngel stepped in, trying to steady him by insisting they fought brilliantly, and that the death toll was way lower than Orlando had feared. Gista shuts him down fast, facing Arngel straight on and saying, "Since you're the smarter one, you should have already figured out what's going on." Gista's words hit the room like a weight, and Orlando's face snaps into rage the moment the truth finally lands. His rage is justified by the official report from the 157 guys in the subjugation mission. 18 dead, 45 wounded, and that shockingly low body count is being shoved in their faces as proof that their monstrous enemy wasn't even fighting at full strength. Political chess is already underway. Right then, a bandaged soldier staggers in and shoves a formal letter across the table, claiming the Knights of the Lord's army are pinning their own blunders on everyone else. He says Arngel is being marked as the reason the mission collapsed, and the entire fury is being pushed onto the mercenary guild, an excuse the Lord has apparently already swallowed. When the Lord hears the verdict, rage detonates. He slams his fists down and roars that the decision is insane. They tell him his duty is to deal with the new species while hiding the truth, and that failure is unforgivably serious, so punishment is coming. The soldier delivering the blow thinks the same thing. Every crucial detail must have already been handed off. In the Canaan kingdom, Arngel stares at the brutal truth crushing his organization. After the Great War with the Empire ends, the silence of no battles keeps hollowing out their mercenary guild, until they're dragged into managing the country just to avoid being purged, and that decision only makes everything worse. His face twists in pure frustration and helplessness, because he knows he doesn't have the power to truly shield the mercenaries under him. His hand clenches into a fist on the desk, knuckles going stark white, and dread claws at him, because he can already feel the weight of delivering this news. Slumped in defeat, he murmurs an apology to Orlando, and then he realizes another mercenary crew is about to vanish on his watch. Elsewhere, Gister strides away from the latest clash, a heavy sack thumping against her shoulder, sweat dripping down her temple as she looks back and admits, quietly, that the more she thinks, the less it makes sense. Uno watches from afar, eyes locked on her as she disappears, and one thought keeps gnawing at him. What is she? She keeps moving, her mind tangled in heavy thoughts. Because her homeland's been haunted by monsters for ages, and she truly believed her research made her ready for anything, but this creature, it's in a league of its own. Her train of thought gets ripped apart when she spots that familiar pair in the crush of people, Orlando and the monster beside him. A jolt hits her as she realizes they both remember her, too. This new species. She decides it's wrong in every single way. That implication slams into her like a punch. Could its intelligence really be so sharp it can identify people using nothing but their faces and voices? Later, in a loud, lively tavern, Gister wedges herself apart from her companions' non-stop laughs, staring into her drink as her mind spirals. She can't shake the fact she's never heard of a monster like that. The details blur, but she's sure of one thing. Orlando left the bigger impact, so if anyone should matter here, it's him. Her thoughts sprint through a dozen possibilities. Demon sword? She snaps it down right away because it got crushed way too easily for that. And now the creature's mystery only haunts her more, leaving her completely bone-deep confused. Her investigation slams into a jaw-dropping discovery. Daira is held captive and breaking down in distress. Gister erupts, calling her name, while Daira just gapes in total disbelief, unable to process what's happening. She turns her back on Orlando and Arngil, shoots out a quick apology, and admits the mission. Done. Now she has to go back to her country, no matter what they do, because stopping her would be pointless. Orlando can't help it. Concern crawls across his face as he stares at Arngil, wondering why he's not doing anything. As she steps away, she steels herself, eyes locked on every detail of her face, and vows she won't let things with Daira stay like this. Then she pushes straight into the thick, shadowy forest, where the trees rustle like they're hiding secrets. Under the same night sky, Lena pressed her face to the window, eyes full of worry, and whispered, "Sister," into the silent room like she was afraid it wouldn't hear her. A brutal punch lands on Arngil's face, and his head whips to the side from the sheer force. Blood smears his lip as Gister corners him in the office, fury blazing on her face. She jabs a finger at him and snaps, demanding to know what he meant by that giant viper subjugation assignment. Her voice drips with venom as she tells him this mission isn't mercy, it's punishment, and she's sorry, but he's been marked too. Try to run and they'll brand him a fugitive, and then, boom, the sight of that massive dark-scaled viper slams into view, warning him how deadly this job really is. Still, he looks completely unfazed, a confident smirk tugging at his lips. Then he calmly says it would be genuinely tough to head back to his mother country right now. Her composure snaps like glass. She erupts in disbelief, demanding to know if this punishment is real, then blasts the idea that a disaster-class subjugation mission is too brutal, even for someone in peak condition, calling it nothing short of a death sentence. Orlando steps in, face set with grim resolve, saying the blame should have landed on the knight who botched the orders. Then he looks away, murmurs Daira through regret, and finally sighs that this is what Canaan has become. He keeps his brutal judgment coming to Gister, a smug, wry grin lighting his face, and lays out the choice. Run and get hunted by the whole country for bailing on the mission, or stand against the other mercenaries. Either way, it's hell. But at least if a monster's standing there, he figures the fight will be simple. Resolve hardens on his face as he blurts a desperate plea. No one in the room, just the missing Daira, begging her to lend him her strength. Down below, she barely looks up, her gaze locked in, frustration and conflict twisting her expression. Just when the tension peaks, everything snaps to a new detail. Lena's hand glides in and carefully cradles two tiny vials brimming with clear liquid. Elsewhere, a totally different scene slams into view. Uno tears into a hunk of meat, roaring with pure joy as he gushes that it's incredible, all thanks to the black pepper he snagged in Canaan. And even though the peppermill mole gave him is a little on the small side, he swears it's been worth every bit of the trouble. He keeps chewing through the same meal for days. On day 1, he's savoring every bite of pork like it's pure gold. But by day 2, the spark starts to fade. And on day 3, even though the food still tastes fine, something sour finally creeps in and makes him feel dissatisfied. That thought snaps into place like a lightning strike. He's done with meat, and he's craving vegetables so hard it hurts. He stared at this sudden craving like it was a curse. Back when he was human, he swore he could live on meat alone, but now that it's all he has, even the idea of vegetables feels unbearable, and he can't stop wondering, is his own body demanding them? His mind wanders straight to fruits and sugar, things he could grab in Canaan. until a tiny slime zaps that idea right out of him, insisting elves aren't all about veggies and fruit. They chow down on both meat and produce for a balanced diet. He won't buy the idea that dealing with elves is impossible. Then he weighs the Caesarea kingdom, only to realize its farms are all huddled near the capital, so any move there is pure disaster. The South. Forget it, he absolutely loathes that place. All other doors slammed shut, so he finally gives up and locks onto the only path left, Canaan. He can't take another chance of being picked. He sprints across the plains, and the memory hits him. Those old empire farmlands were stripped apart and turned into penal colonies, which could make this search way easier. He's already picked out a few possible sites from the map and locked one into his head, and now he's headed to scout the facility while the treasure he's guarding stays asleep. He's going for the first candidate site, Emiriad, sitting north of the Furless Empire, and now he's finally reached the very edge of the Emiriad blank zone. He bolts up to a jagged rocky outcrop used to spy on elves, and for a moment he weighs staying there overnight just to finally get some rest. Then, without warning, he flips his decision fast. He realizes the real priority is locking down a water source at the next supply stop. He's been slacking off his surveillance duties for a while now, and he knows it's time to move. He dredges up the blonde elf's carefree laughter, and one frank thought keeps slamming him, her jaw-dropping physique. Shaking off the memory, he decides it's too soon to dwell, so it's time to move. Because if he can't run his surveillance, lingering gets him nowhere. Then he hurls himself off the high cliff, diving straight for the river below. He touches down without a sound, slips into thick riverbank brush, and cranes his neck toward the elven observation post. He stays hidden, eyes locked on a base crouched beside a waterfall, dead silent, utterly abandoned, like nobody's alive or even stepping near it. He clenches his teeth, baffled because what on earth could have happened here? When nothing happens, frustration claws at him, so he forces himself to breathe and cool his temper, because an imperial soldier has to stay composed at all times. He tells himself it was probably just luck that he spotted them earlier, and then he decides to wait for one more night. On day 2, the full passes keep rolling by, and still the elves won't budge. They don't show up at all. The very next day plays out the same nightmare. No elf steps out at all. His patience snaps and he declares, "Fine, one more day." He won't budge until he gets a look at those breasts again because something's going on and he has to find out. He starts spiraling through possibilities, rubbing his chin like it's burning, thinking, did the elves somehow sniff out his presence and just stop showing up at the river? Or did something shift in their routines for a totally different reason? And the strangest punch in the gut, of all elves, it's the one he can't stop obsessing over who seems to have suddenly vanished. He figures there's nothing he can do for the Einherjar, so he slams his surveillance mission on pause, until the elves fix whatever chaos they're dealing with. And yeah, he wonders for a second if that might actually be a good sign. He shoves the thought aside, telling himself it's just temporary. They'll meet again soon. And then he snaps back to the mission ahead, marching toward Conan with fresh purpose, ready for a whole new kind of harvest. He braced himself for the journey, but every step felt like it weighed a ton. The trip dragged way longer than he expected, and his hunger wasn't even keeping up. The first place he checked was a letdown, though he'd banked on a farming village nearby. So he decided to hole up for one night before he pushed on. The second possible location turned into a bigger disaster. When he checked, it was nothing but a dead, empty field, bare as a desert. He ripped through his notes, boiling with frustration, because the spots themselves were fine, but his brain just wouldn't lock onto the route. He swore a mountain in the north was the key, yet he couldn't tell if the southeast was closer. He groaned at his own luck, stuck with a combat-ready body while forced into plain, helpless recon. Realizing his lack of finesse was a problem begging for a quick fix, he stopped overthinking and turned right, southeast now. His new route dumped him at the third candidate spot, a village, only this one was torn apart and left in ruins. He tiptoed through the silent streets, reading the air like a warning. These buildings weren't fully ruined, and there was still a faint, lingering pulse of life, like the village had only just been deserted. His gaze snapped to a huge, splintered hole torn through the wooden wall. This time, there was no human battle behind it, only the ugly handiwork of a monster, and the silence was terrifying, because there wasn't a single sign the villagers had ever fought back. He slid into a detective's mindset, studying the scene like a nightmare puzzle. How this attack hit so huge, so silently, meant the thing had crept up on them unnoticed. No blood, no stench of decay, just one grim answer. The villagers were probably swallowed whole. Then he snapped the culprit into focus, an ominous shadow viper. Over the fence, he caught sight of it, one massive snake, and his theory snapped into place. This thing was famous for hypnosis, the kind that could steal your thoughts, but he shrugged off the danger and kept moving. His body was built to beat monsters like this. Then his eyes slid past the beast, and there it was, the field of vegetables he'd been hunting for. His excitement died fast. The crops weren't ready, and rats had already stripped the storehouse clean, so this place was another dead end. With a heavy sigh, he knew he had no choice but to cross the mountains ahead. You pushed deeper and deeper, crashing into a thick, strange forest no one recognized. Thick jungle foliage swallowed the path and tripped every step, and he'd been sure he could cross that mountain in a blink, only for the towering trees to drag his progress to a crawl and ignite pure frustration. Suddenly, he slammed to a stop, every sense screaming about footsteps, and it wasn't just one. He counted at least 10, maybe more, and his mind raced. Were these the same people from the village he'd just left? He lunged forward to see through the trees, but in his rush his foot slipped on the uneven ground, and he went tumbling down a steep incline. He plummeted down the slope, fighting with all he had to stop his runaway momentum. He slammed into the ground in a heap, dizziness crashing over him, and he cursed his latest streak of bad luck, because no matter how massive his power was, it still couldn't save him from these stupid little mishaps. Once his sight finally sharpened, he realized he was boxed in by a whole squadron of soldiers, Orlando standing at the front, leading the charge. Orlando froze in disbelief. Then Uno's stomach dropped with panic, because he finally realized his luck had hit rock bottom, and he'd been careless, never once thinking they'd find him out this deep in the mountains. Orlando storms up to the blonde female warrior, grilling her for showing up at exactly the worst time. Then she just coolly fixes her choker and fires back, asking if he's closing in because he can smell Orlando on her. Gister watches from nearby, calling it a terrible move, and the spiky-haired soldier backs him up with a fierce, exactly. As the tension skyrockets, Uno watches from the sidelines and calls out their bluff. He's sure they're just posturing, no real plans to fight, so he thinks scaring him is pointless. Then he storms forward and yells at them to back down and wave. Just when he thinks he's got a moment to breathe, the magenta-haired woman, Gister, slams into existence right in front of him, like magic made flesh, and he's left stunned, scrambling to figure out who she really is. Behind him, Daira blurts out Gister's name, while another voice snaps that the newcomer is the paysan of the demonic sword. Right before he can even react, she rockets forward and smashes him square in the face with her chest, leaving Uno completely stunned by the wild, unexpected start to their meeting. From that creepy greeting, questions start popping off in his head. What just happened? And then this Magi-haired woman hits him with the simplest thing. Are you finished? He's totally baffled because to him, there's no way a monster would see a gesture like that as anything at all. A sudden wave of panic hits him and he jerks back, heart pounding, as he wonders, what if this guy somehow knows exactly who I really am? To calm his raging agitation, she slams the butt of her staff down on his helmeted head with a brutal thud, and then offers a heartfelt apology right after. She backs up and drags the tip of her staff through the air, carving out a glowing, serpentine sigil right in front of him. And Uno watches in stunned silence as the magic snaps into place. The moment it appeared, he clocked the pattern right away and nailed the summon instantly, a shadow viper. The woman with magenta-black hair snaps through her incantation, finishing it with sharp, perfect hand signs, eyes locked in as she seals the spell. Her spell finishes, and the magenta-haired woman snaps the summon viper out of existence. Then, eyes locked on the future, she thrusts her hand forward and boldly vows to borrow the power of everyone who came before her. Her demand lands with a jolt. She fires her gaze at Daira, demanding to know if she's really serious about this move. Daira doesn't flinch. Her face is set like stone. She admits betting everything on some unknown monster is a horrifying plan, but she insists it's exactly what they need. Uno's has to join them if they're going to take down the serpent. He hears the proposal and immediately clocks the trap. There's nothing in it for him, not even a sliver, because the last time he threw himself into helping villagers still haunts him, and now he can't ignore the fact that with no leverage to work with, he stands to gain absolutely nothing. He quietly nods to himself, mumbling that he's done chasing anything like that. Orlando smashes through the silence, bursting into a shout at the magenta-haired woman, calling her reckless and snapping, "Be quiet." Uno watches the whole thing, stunned by how smoothly Orlando talks and by that weird nickname, a paysan he uses for her. She barrels past the interruption, voice trembling with desperation, swearing she'll use every trick in the book to get back home. Because the moment Daira's hopeful face flashes in her mind, that promise locks in like iron. Uno's takes that passionate plea to heart, and in the quiet that follows, he can't stop weighing how this could benefit him. Without a word, he shoots his hand out and yanks the woman by the chest, lifting her clean off the ground before she even gets a chance to react. He pinches a tiny glowing object between his fingers, snatched straight from that retire, then holds it up like it's a miracle, and the woman freezes, staring in total shock. He calmly quotes his price, 5 magic potions, then clocks her pale face and asks, straight up, if she finally gets what he's after and if she's ready to bargain. The moment she realizes how sharp he really is, her whole idea of monsters collapses, and she starts trembling as everything she believed crumbles to dust. That order for 5 potions crushed the group. She spun to her partner and blurted out how many vials Edward said they had, and Edward answered, "Only 2." And Gister's face tightened as she realized, with hers counted in, they only had 3 total. With her declaration hanging in the air, she spun back to Uno and jabbed at the 3 vials on the ground, proof that she couldn't swallow his price. He pulled out 2 green magic potions of his own and pointed at them, then suggested they combine, his 2 with her 3, claiming that would be more than enough. The 5 potions sat in a perfect circle on the ground, and the sight left her Gister speechless, eyes bulging with pure disbelief. As soon as the payment was done, UNOS slammed his fist down and called the negotiation a success. Then he hoisted Gister onto his broad shoulder in one swift motion, while Orlando and Diara stared in shock. Orlando blurted out Diara's name, panic rising, then he. As he held her, he burned with respect. Her determination was undeniable, and the fact she'd accept this without a fight told him this Apatian had real grit. He then thrust a tiny round object toward her, and when she snatched it from his hand, her face snapped from shock to sudden understanding. She took it without a second thought, and as it settled in her hands, she realized the hesitation was gone. Now she believed fully and fiercely. Her resolve hardened like steel, then she declared, "I'm Unit 7 and playtime's over." From the top of UNOS, she perched and braced for whatever hit next. Their pact snapped into place, sealed for real. As Unos and Gister readied to move, Orlando gawked in disbelief, mumbling that this had to be a lie. Then the unlikely duo stood side by side, and a brand new alliance was born. That surprise alliance hit their companion like a punch, and Diara in particular just couldn't wrap her head around it. She flat out said she didn't understand their move. Still, she refused to sit back and watch them do whatever they wanted in silence. Her bottled-up rage finally snapped into a no-holds-barred showdown. Orlando, with Arngel and Diara at his sides, pressed Gister hard. Was she really choosing to back a whole new species? Gister didn't even flinch. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Unos and roared back and swore they'd give those damn knights a battle they'd never forget. Uno's reflex kicks in. He's got a job to do. Team up with this mercenary crew and wipe out monsters, and they'll pay him with a magic potion. From the scraps of talk he's been catching here and there, the full nightmare of what they're really dealing with is slowly snapping into place. Unos watches the mercenaries march forward, all of them shoved into this pointless nightmare after their subjugation operation blew up, and the sour gloom around them says everything. Unos can't shake the feeling this is punishment. Out of nowhere, Gister, the Magina-haired woman, screams at the men, calling them damn knights and snapping them out of their sulking. Then she hammers down her plan. She'll use Uno's power to stop the nobles cold and crush every last bit of their ambition. He agreed to help for the potion, and somehow the chaos doesn't even feel all bad, at least not yet. Then a sharp thought hits him. If anyone uncovers what he can truly perceive or what he really is, trouble could explode fast. He scans their crew and realizes that without their captain, and without the woman who just fought the Shadow Viper, their chances of pulling this off look grim. Gister S in his sight, and right away he takes in that jaw-dropping figure, then decides she's just a peasant. The mercenaries slam on the brakes in a forest clearing, and one guy calls it the perfect spot to set up camp for the day, while another whips his focus toward Unos, standing off by himself, and asks his partner if the creature's okay. Gister spots him frozen in place, marches right up and blurts, "What's wrong?" He tilts his head to answer, but she shuts it down with a dismissive snap and strides off before he can even speak. A vicious aura crawls out of that woman, and Uno feels a sharp chill hit him, because he instantly clocks just how formidable and commanding she is. She whips her gaze back with a confident smirk, and you can practically hear her thoughts begging to watch his perfect stoic composure crack. She watched Uno drift away from the group, her face tightening with irritation, then snapped, calling out, was he trying to show off? And cut him down fast, reminding him they had work to do. 30 minutes later, he barreled back with the lifeless carcasses of several small, boar-like creatures draped over his shoulder, and the mercenaries just stared. One of them couldn't believe what he was seeing, while Gister stood there, struck dumb for a moment. He even spread out a whole bundle of tools, A massive knife, a shovel, and a coiled rope on the ground. Then his stomach dropped as he suddenly realized, with a jolt, he'd come all this way to hunt boars. Her eyes went wide with shock at the equipment. There's no way this is real, she thought, panic surging as her mind tried to grasp how impossible it all was. With cold, methodical focus, he siphoned the creature's blood into the earth, then hoisted the carcasses so they'd bleed out fully before he dropped to the ground and started butchering. He then snapped his words at the stunned crowd, claiming he'd drain the blood of this new species and dig a grave to bury the tainted soil. He kept on working, carving and shaping skewers out of the meat with his own hands, and the mercenaries just stared in disbelief. Then one finally blurted out, "Did you really make these yourself?" That first jolt of shock melted into easy laughter. One mercenary even said nothing should ever surprise him again. Yet Gister was a total wreck, glaring at Unos with pure shock and raging frustration. He expertly grilled the skewers over the flames, the meat popping and sizzling loud enough to hear, and Gister stared, her head spinning, because somehow, against all odds, he was actually cooking them a whole meal. The moment that mouth-watering aroma rolled through the air, the mercenaries stared with drool in their eyes. Gister clutched her chest, burning inside, while he kept grilling the meat, and 10 long minutes later, she was ready to beg him for a taste of anything. He just stares, dumbstruck, as Uno meticulously seasons the meat, grinding salt between his armored fingers. And when she finally snaps, she jabs her finger at him and screams that the whole damn situation is utterly absurd. When she explodes, Uno doesn't argue. He just hands her a piping hot skewer of meat, and the slime nearby starts bouncing like it can't contain its joy. Gister is still flustered, and she demands answers. Why is some monster grilling meat for them on an iron plate? She snaps that she wants nothing to do with it. No meat, not a bite. Then refuses again and again. Anaz isn't bothered at all, just slides the offer right back in and asks if she wants more, while the slime creature chirps in that Anaz is just seasoning the food with salt and pepper, and trying to make himself easy to understand with simple words, even if it looks like he's doing it purely on his own whims. Her fury sputters out, and a hot, flustered blush takes over. Then she realizes with a jolt that she's somehow captivated by the idea that touching him is allowed, just because he's a monster. Meanwhile, Orlando takes a bite of the cooked meat and tells Annie that he'd originally thought Uno was a terrifying monster. But now he's staring at a surprisingly friendly side of him. Annie just watches with a small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. The Canaan captain doesn't share that upbeat mood. He glares into the distance, face twisted with regret, swearing he's become useless, because back then their crew only managed to wipe out 18 or 19 giant vipers. Then it hits him, right from the start, the odds were rigged against them, and with fire back in his eyes, he decides to bet everything on one last, desperate gamble. Right in the middle of his thoughts, a weird sight yanks him up. Uno is hunched over, meticulously scrubbing his armored body with a cloth like it's holy work, and Orlando blurts out how shocked he is that the creature is disinfecting itself. Annie Riley just smirks that the monster's cleaner than he is, and the captain only grunts that this was a terrible idea. Who knows then whirls around and thrusts the damp cloth at Gister, only for her to jerk back in pure shock. A monster, obsessed with cleanliness, is so wildly wrong it barely makes sense. She yanks the claw from his hand, eyes blazing with fury and confusion as she finally clocks it. This claw is just a reused towel meant as a benefit, yet he's grinning like an idiot, clearly delighted as if he's thanking her for doing the work. Her confusion skyrockets when Uno suddenly lunges in and locks his arms around her from behind, grip iron tight. Then a jolt of something strange floods through her and steals her breath for a second. Just like that, he lets go. He claps once, grinning like he just solved a mystery, and says the energy he couldn't refill during his surveillance mission is finally back. He even thanks her, leaving her staring at him, utterly lost at how that all just happened. While they cut through the woods, Uno suddenly stops dead, his head twitching like he's caught a threat in the air. Gister, the magina-haired woman, clocks his panic and demands to know what he's sensing. He forced himself to stay frozen, straining to catch that faint, slithering hiss as it crawled through the trees, getting closer, closer with every heartbeat. Even though he can't spot where it's coming from, he hears it crystal clear. Then the rustling in the trees tells him it's about 20 meters off, and he's almost sure it's a snake. Gister praises his killer reaction speed, while across the way a mercenary stalks the source, a colossal shadow viper, way bigger than the usual 10-meter monsters he's used to, and he starts wondering, is it a mutant? Then Gister fires off the question, who even knows if that magic medicine is actually doing its job? Kane and Captain bark orders for everyone to stay on high alert, and Gister shoots back that she can't see or hear a thing. But something's out there, because a brutal rustling explodes from the thick woods and proves the presence is real. An unseen creature surges forward, and Uno snaps to the truth. It's charging in with everything it's got to smash them. The mercenary braces, sweating as he tries to spot the angle, but when he looks to the captain for answers, the captain just admits he has no clue where it's coming from. Suddenly, the Canaan captain spots it and erupts, screaming, "Look up!" And right from the canopy, a giant snake drops down with its jaws wide open, smashing its head into the ground with a brutal thud, barely missing the mercenary captain. The mercenary captain bellows that they've lost it again, the Canaan captain snaps for a pursuit, and the magic soldiers light the way. Yet Uno swears he can't feel it anymore. Gister turns to him, grinning that sure, his nose is handy, but now she needs him too for a truffle pitch. With a wicked grin, she warns him, "If you smear it all over yourself, you're getting a punishment, right there, and it'll be a thorough lick." Before Uno can even blink, the giant snake clamps down and coils hard around his body, tightening with every breath, until he's left wondering if Gister really wanted him to get crushed. With no way out, Uno just resigns himself. Maybe he should stop fighting and let it happen. He stays cool inside the snake's coils, thinking he just got the luckiest break. No chasing, no capturing, just done for them. He spots it. The creature is making contact. Right away, the Canaan captain snaps with alarm, while Magenta Herdwoman raises her staff and starts a spell, light blazing at the tip. His confidence is rock solid. Then he erupts with a shout, claiming his victory is inevitable, and an unseen force tears out of his body, smashing straight into the serpent's head. The creature staggers from the hit, and Azunos yanks the massive coils apart with his bare hands. The Canaan captain can't believe what he's seeing, because he knows that giant viper's squeeze is brutal enough to snap down big trees. He keeps fighting the crushing pressure, but the blonde warrior yells that escape is impossible. Then the serpent lunges, drives its fangs into his shoulder, and dark blood erupts in a violent spray. The brutal assault slams into them so hard that his companions, the Canaan captain, the mercenary captain, and the blonde female warrior, get stuck in stunned silence. Even with a brutal wound tearing him up, Uno just stays ice calm, because his goal is already done. One crushing punch and he shatters the serpent's head, spraying gore everywhere. The hit lands hard, shattering the creature's skull into nothing but fragments. He stands in the middle of the wreckage, and that headless body is still clinging to him. Then he realizes, too late, that charging a giant with brute force is pure recklessness, especially when blood pours from his wounded arm. He admits, even to himself, that he tried to look calm, but the snake's crushing constriction hits harder than he ever expected, and that giant body makes the danger real. With the danger gone, he clamps down on the heavy, scaled body, then drives his last burst of strength, snapping its spine in one brutal motion and flinging the lifeless coil aside. He drags the mercenary captain's limp body along, and when the captain's eyes twitch open, he groggily realizes with a jolt that he's still alive. Canaan captain surges forward, yanks the wounded man out of his grasp, and blurts in stunned terror at just how bad he's fallen. His eyes snap to the towering, silent presence of Onos, and the captain jolts as the truth hits him hard. He still doesn't even know the name of the man who saved them. He locks eyes with UNOS, jaw set, and declares, "For now, I'll only offer my gratitude, because it's you, UNOS, who keeps my men alive." Uno just turned his head, flat out saying he doesn't need anyone thanking him for handing over that medicine. The captain is stunned for a second, like he can't believe he just heard "thank you" again after forever. Then he snaps, asking Unos if he's all right, because from the look of it, his life isn't in immediate danger. With his business with the soldiers wrapped up, Uno strides straight toward Gister and declares, "I've done what had to be done. Now it's time to cash in and collect the magic medicine." Gister just quietly hands him a small bag. He snatches the bag, peeks inside, and counts exactly 3 blue vials and 2 green ones. Then he ties it shut before moving on. Right before he can finish, Gister blurts out that she forgot something. Then she lunges forward and snatches his big armored hand, and it shocks him so hard he can't even react in time. She lifts his hand to her lips and plants a gentle kiss on the back of his armored knuckles, then pulls away, and a bright blush blooms across her cheeks. Her hand stayed locked in his, and that split-second touch somehow dragged on, warm and electric between them. That gesture totally flustered Gister. Heat rushed to her cheeks as she jerked her gaze away, while a young woman with reddish hair just watched, pouting like it bothered her. Uno, though, lit up with delight, grins stretching wide as he reveled in how way better this meeting turned out than he ever expected. Then he grabbed one of the potion vials they'd handed him and crunched down on it with a nasty snap. With the hat snug on her head and her staff gripped tight, Gister, ready to leave, whirled around for one last, lingering look at him. She slipped back to her companions, their silhouettes shrinking into the moonlit night, and Uno just stared, one thought pounding in his head as he remembered her nickname. Peasant. Still, he couldn't deny it. She was impressive and somehow downright cool. Uno pinches his own armored cheeks, and pure bliss lights up his face. Joy hit his chest after the job paid off. He told the slime and the watching villagers that once he split from the reserve soldiers, he rode back to the imperial capital as their goblin slayer, and bam. He collected a bounty loaded with fresh vegetables. He just crashed into sleep the moment he got back the day before. 3 days of non-stop activity is apparently his breaking point. But when morning hits, he's recharged, sliding right back into cooking and chopping those vegetables with full-on intensity. In his chef's uniform, he stands with arms crossed, chest out, proudly unveiling the day's menu with a giant platter of sizzling stir-fried pork and vegetables. And the slime creature takes its first bites, while those veggies, soaked in pork fat, hit with this sweet, juicy punch, and the meat tastes even better than before. He can't believe just salt and pepper cooked up something this deep and insanely complex. It's like a blink, one snap, and the whole plate gets wiped spotless, lick by lick, leaving both him and his tiny sidekick totally, completely, proudly satisfied. Dissatisfaction ignites fast, and now he's craving something new. New flavors, new combos, anything but the same old taste. The moment he imagines adding sauce or ketchup, he's obsessed, pining for seasonings from the old empire that probably don't even exist in other lands, because his hunger for culinary perfection won't ever quit. He'd still say those ancient empire spices were basically untouchable. No way he'd dare use stuff from 200 years ago, unless the old factories were still running, because then he could just brew them himself. A gut-punch realization hits him, and then he locks eyes with the stylish, visor-wearing woman beside him, like she'd read his mind. If those people don't exist, then fine, they'll forge them themselves. New ambition hit him like a spark. He'd read cookbooks after cookbooks, but the idea of making the seasonings himself never even crossed his mind. Then confidence surged, and he just knew there had to be a book somewhere with the recipes to create them from scratch. With his purpose crystal clear, he announced his next mission: hunt down a cookbook packed with seasoning recipes. Then he set his sights on the Oquamel. His adventure kicks off right there, barreling through the wild while a roaring stream crashes beside him. He burst into a quiet clearing in the forest, the kind the elves always seem to slip into. Then he dove into the thick bushes and checked. Yep, he'd found the exact place. In his hiding place, he peeked and caught the blonde elf woman bathing, and dread hit him. Because with Oqual gone, his whole plan could get messy fast. But the elf wasn't thinking about him at all. She started musing, saying a paysan was great, yet there was something only elves could offer, and then she confirmed she'd found it. His mind lit up with a bright, dreamlike vision of bathing elves. Then reality slammed in hard, because the riverbank in front of him was silent, empty, and utterly lifeless. Frustration clawed at him. He'd even worried that shifting the time and place could backfire, but it never once hit him that the elves might not show up at all. When they didn't appear, the shock hit like a thunderclap. Shock snapped into iron resolve. He stood up, shouted into the forest, taunted the missing elves, and demanded to know if they really thought they could slip past his watch before he swore he'd track down their brand-new bathing spot. With a grit-filled grunt, he launched into a sprint, bulldozing through the tangled undergrowth, hunting for his core. His search snapped to a stop the moment he stumbled into the wreckage of a fresh fight. Magic had burned a tree black, arrows littered the ground, and a nearby trunk was split open by a brutal sword slash. He stared at the scene and knew it wasn't some simple hunt. Then it hit him. Elves were actually fighting someone. Humans duking it out with elves felt wildly impossible, and the idea of elves attacking monsters they were supposed to protect. That was straight up unthinkable. His mind snapped back to a chat with a blonde elf. She'd said it all so plainly. Elves were so ridiculously powerful that when a monster turned into a real threat, they just wiped it out as a matter of course. Back in the present, he stayed tucked away, reading the elves' vigilance like a threat on the air. So intense it had never hit him on any patrol. As footsteps thundered closer, he locked in and counted, clocking them at about 15 to 18. Just that eerie sound suddenly led to a squad of elven warriors, bows raised, faces set in stone, marching in tight formation straight toward the woods. As they marched right past his hiding spot, he snapped his gaze to their armor, stunned. What kind of monster is this that the elves couldn't crush? The answer hit hard when his eyes locked on one of them. The blindfolded elf, number 8. He remembered that gut feeling something terrible was about to blow up, and then he saw why the crucial number 8 was suddenly being dragged into the spotlight. Yep, his premonition was dead right. A jolt tore through him. Number 8 was staring right at him. He could feel it like she'd sensed him the moment he showed up. Panic pinned him to the spot. She looked frighteningly unstoppable, and he knew one wrong move would be his end. He snapped into doubt. Did she really sense him, or was this just luck that made her look his way? Maybe she'd clocked him instantly, then decided he wasn't worth worrying about. The elven crew pushed on, then finally halted at the edge of the bathing pool, now deadly still. But then a flicker snapped into the corner of his vision, and the whole scene warped for a heartbeat. Ice-cold sweat burst across his skin as the truth hit him. Something was camouflaged right there, invisible in plain sight. He vanished so completely that not even a whisper gave him away, and he knew his camouflage had leapfrogged what the shadow viper heat had shown him before. So he stared at the elves and wondered what they were hunting, because even the sharp eyes of number 8 couldn't spot him. Then a cold idea hit. With the whole area this blind, a surprise strike would be brutally, dangerously effective. Like his thought sparked a signal, the ground exploded. Thick tentacles slammed out and snared an unready elf warrior, cutting her scream as she got yanked away hard. And when the chaos hit, the blindfolded 08 burst out, barking a warning. The monstrous limb yanked its victim into the thick undergrowth at blinding speed, while the other elves snapped into panic. And from his hiding spot, Uno's watch didn't linger on fear anymore. It zeroed in on keeping number 8 safe. More tentacles erupted and yanked the elven warriors into their grasp, and he clocked the attack instantly. This thing was packing a magic the elves can't handle, the kind that turns their bodies into an all-you-can-eat buffet. Even while the others got crushed and swallowed by the chaos, number 8 stayed locked in, head cocked like she was listening to every terrifying second. One of the warriors got brutally slammed into a tree trunk, and the impact stunned him so hard he couldn't even move right away. Then the sight shook his mind. How could the elves be getting wiped out that easily, and were they getting help from the Imperial army? His eyes snapped straight onto the elf, trapped tight in the creature's claws. Then right there he finally saw it. He checked his hunch for the second time, this time on another of those riding tentacles. He pushed up a little from his hiding spot, the info snapping into place. There was a monstrous octopus-like beast out there, and he couldn't wrap his head around how something that huge stayed unseen without a single sound, especially since it didn't look like it had any camouflage at all. Then the creature dropped its disguise and showed its true nightmare. An enormous cephalopod towering over the trees, its intelligent eyes blazing down as it hoisted an elf captive high in the air. The monster ripped number 8 through the air, and that snapped him into action. Those tentacles meant nothing to him. Saving number 8 was the only priority, so he hurled himself forward. He surged forward and slammed his armored hand onto one of the monster's slimy tentacles, and with a furious grunt he snapped it shut in his grip, calling the whole mess painfully tedious as he forced the elf's momentum to stop. He clutched her tight with one arm, keeping the blindfolded elf pressed close, while she dangled limp in his grip as the colossal monster's other tentacles slammed and writhed around him. Its assault stalled, just for now. Far off in the distance, a light-haired young man watched everything explode into motion, his expression carved from calm focus. Then his eyes snapped to a man in a suit standing nearby. Who was he? Was that his parent, his father? The man who called himself his father flashed a calm, gentle smile, and the young guy, radiating this eerie heat, started blurting out apologies, saying the elf was an enemy of the Empire. The father just soothed him, telling him it was fine, but the young man couldn't let it go. He insisted she was none other than specifically number 8. A foggy memory claws its way back. Some man in a suit, the father, stares at a younger, light-haired guy and mouths out his thanks. But the kid jerks his head away, his face swallowed by mist. Vision snaps away, and then pure fire hits. Uno yanks a blindfolded elf woman into his grip, and his huge body becomes a wall against the flames as he roars his promise. He'll fight no matter what to protect her. The moment the declaration lands, violence erupts. This colossal octopus monster thrashes forward, snaring them both in its writhing tentacles. One vicious appendage rams into Uno's side, and while the elf woman clings on, all he can think is how sickening this thing is, and who on earth could ever eat something like that. He staggers back from the blast, utterly lost. Then a thick, dark fluid bursts from the wound, splashing across his armored body. He stares down in disbelief, like what just happened. When the scorching liquid splashes onto his jagged mouth, his eyes blow wide with shock. The taste hits, and it's dangerously delicious. The octopus monster clocks his reaction, and its hunger roars to life. Yep, he's right, octopus is delicious, and now it's demanding more. He shoots the worried elf woman a sharp glance, then his eyes drop, and a savage intent takes over. A low growl rumbles out of him as he snarls that he wants more and more, right now. With rage roaring in his chest, Buno declares the monster his prey. Then he launches forward, smashing his fist into its head and blasting tentacles back with the impact. Salt snaps the beast into a frenzy. Then he launches at the monster, shredding flesh with ripping bites, fueled by a hunger that never dies. Nothing can stop him, and he won't stop. The reason is gone, pure primal instinct takes over. Lunos gets swallowed by the act, tearing into his foe as he's drenched in gore. All he can think is the mantra, repeating, "Delicious, so delicious, why does it feel this good?" His eyes slowly flickered open, that wild rampage glint draining away as his mind finally snapped back into place. He slumped on the shore in a daze, staring at the colossal octopus monster's torn-apart remains, while the sand stayed jet black from its fluids. He spun around, totally lost, fighting to remember what he'd just done. He only knew he'd been trying to help number 8. Then it hit him in broken flashes. The octopus meat was soft, juicy, and ridiculously delicious. That thought slammed through his mind like a nightmare. Then the horrifying punch hit. The octopus tasted delicious, and as he stared ahead, horror froze him in place at what he'd just remembered. While he fought to make sense of it, the blindfolded elf woman screamed that this couldn't be real, because her thoughts were unraveling, and she swore she'd been nailed inside a nightmare as she crumpled to the ground. She scrambles across the forest floor, begging for medicine, or even sleep, to outrun the nightmare of what she just saw, while down in his gut something feels horribly wrong. He ate well the day before, his activity limit was nowhere close, yet the truth is, something is seriously off. He figured out the monster he swallowed was the culprit, so panic surged through him. He thrust his fingers down his throat and fought to force himself to vomit, every second screaming in agony as he clawed toward escape. As he kept struggling, the blindfolded elf woman finally gave in. Her body went dead still, and she crumpled into unconsciousness on the cracked dirt. Far away in a sterile, death-quiet room, a young man stared straight ahead, his expression impossible to read. He froze in the office chair, perfectly still, hands planted on the armrests as he waited, tense as a drawn bow. He froze solid, like his body forgot how to work, and his voice snagged in his throat. Could this really be nothing more than a dream? As his awareness crept back in, loud clapping thundered all around him. He snapped his gaze upward and saw a guy in a white coat standing right in front of him, clapping slowly like he meant every second. Then the man leaned in and offered him his congratulations. With a sly grin, the scientist declared that the dream itself was the smoking gun. His experiment had worked, and he swore he'd reward the young man who'd been lucky enough to survive. Confusion twisted into rage, and he vowed he'd never forget that man's face, because he was the last researcher he'd spoken to back when he was still human. The scientist kept talking. This was only a planted visual memory. Then he muttered that he was probably dead already, so there was nothing a young man could do about it. He nudged his glasses into place and waved off the thought of his own mortality like it didn't matter. Then, time running out, he snapped that it was time to cut straight to the point. He revealed the kid had snagged cells from either the Genetic Enhancement Soldier Project or the Chimera Project, and then he blurted out his hope it came from the Ultimate Organism Project, before shooting a question. Did the kid even understand what that choice would unleash? The young man's fist clenched with pure fury at the scientist's casual tone, but the scientist only grinned and told him to go see the truth for himself. His vision jolted, two grotesque, blood-soaked monsters surged into view, and dread slammed into him. If they used to be humans too, then every life he's taken has been human. As the young man reeled from that bombshell, the scientist's projection flipped back to him, flashing the grim news that their time was up, and somehow he wore it like a calm, almost cheerful grin. He stood before the seated young man and laid out every detail of his transformation, then swore, with the scientist's own guarantee, that no matter what came before, he'd been reborn into a terrifyingly powerful new life form. His smile spread wider as he poured out a heartfelt wish for them to meet again. Then he admitted the truth. The tech only lets their moments last so long, so this session had to end. Still, he promised that in the next memory they play, he'll finally show you his real purpose. Then he dropped a truly horrifying thought on the poor kid, like, what if I'm the one eating a human right now? And with a wicked calm, he told him not to panic, because this whole nightmare would get locked away and only reappear at the next viewing. The scientist's smug projection snapped into nothing with a nasty glitch, and the young man stood there, eyes blazing with disbelief and rage, forced to wrestle with the terrifying truth he'd just heard. A bold declaration gets pushed forward thanks to Mariah Sesset's recommendation, and then, once again, our style Gardel comes roaring in as it's made amico. The blindfolded elf, number 8, erupts in rage and rips the document in two, screaming at the injustice. Rage burns in Marius's direction, at the woman who pushed Arsal Gardel for the job, because she swears Marius is a lunatic who fell for the very man she was supposed to be with. Hatred was born from an old incident, back when this gorgeous elf kept staring at her chest, and even after she shut him down, kept pushing his luck, trying to drag her into being his, until his non-stop advances finally led straight to what happened now. Right now, Mariah Zess barrels in and demands answers. Why is she so furious? Then starts accusing her of stealing that man with nothing but her big chest. The elf, still blindfolded as she reads, can't believe it. They're blaming her looks, and it's extra infuriating because Mariah's a top-tier noble. She keeps firing accusations, saying Zessit's family has a nasty habit of snatching glory from crushed tribes, and that her personality is pure rot, while the blindfolded elf blurts that it all feels like a scheme cooked up just to push her out of the way. That role she's been shoved into isn't some pretty title. It means becoming a living sacrifice to the monster in the woods, the nightmare of the forest. This beast carries a bloody past. 10 years ago it first surfaced as a nightmare for the elves, slaughtering and devouring over 1,000 of them. And just a year ago Sword Saint Schubart finally struck it down, only for everyone to think he'd died with it. Now the monster is back and Schubart's alive, just barely, old as dust and still writhing in the wounds from their last battle. As the nightmare closes in, the kind of destruction it could unleash is terrifying beyond words. That's why the Miko exists. Mariah flat-out says her official job is to lock away her own vision and sharpen every other sense to catch the nightmare's stealth. But then she drops the real bomb. The Miko's true purpose is something completely different. She pictured a future with no rescue in sight, one nightmare of a place where she'd be captured and swallowed whole. But that moment still hadn't come. So with a heavy heart, she started her life as a Miko in training. And even though Zessit had decided things without her say-so, she swallowed her feelings and didn't dare fight back. The whole training turned into pure frustration. She was promised that shutting down her sight would bring amazing results, but the practice felt pointless. Then an instructor started testing her, barking the question. Which way could she feel the other elves? She guessed north, then southeast, then 2 to the west. Each time she hesitated, her senses scrambling as she fought to lock onto their exact direction. He said her power to sense presences was finally enough for Miko, and right beside them Mariah Zessit smirked, thrilled her rival fell flat, while Arsal crumpled under the pressure and screamed in pure frustration that she'd messed everything up. Marius soon taunted her, snapping that she shouldn't get ahead of the subjugation plans, and she shot back with a lewd offer. She'd lift Arsal's clothes for service. Arsal turned beet red and begged her to stop. Her patience finally snapped, number 8, and she clenched her fists, twisted her face with raw fury, and screamed for every one of them to die. And it felt like the countdown ended in a blink. The day of the subjugation was here. She slipped through the ranks of warriors, desperate to catch their attention, but they shrugged off her flirting like it was nothing. So she snarled at the inside of her mind, calling them simple-minded fools for actually thinking they could take down the nightmare. She flipped her plan on the spot, bursting into tears, begging for help, and shouting at the men who always keep an eye on her to finally step in. They just strode right past her, unimpressed, and told her coldly that it was time to get back to doing her job. Giving up on them? She snapped that she didn't need useless men at all. Then her senses exploded, because something moved across the river, and it wasn't the nightmare noise she'd been drilled to fear. A surge of overconfidence hit her like lightning. She actually thought she'd cracked it, that she'd become a legend. But then boom, a horrendous, sickening noise tore her pride apart. The nightmare was here. She shrieked in total terror as the warriors around her staggered in shock, completely blindsided. A hulking tentacle traps her, and she gasps in terror, swearing she never saw the monster coming, then begs anyone anywhere to save her, apologizing over and over for failing, even lamenting that she'd be far more useful if she were stripped down, since she's pretty great at housework. As she keeps begging, she insists she's great at her job, until luxury turned her soft, and then wham! A brutal hit smashes the limb that held her, and a towering white-armored brute catches her as she drops, leaving her stunned and gasping. What just happened? What? He clamps her in his arms like she's the last thing keeping the world steady. She blurts out, "Who's there? Who saved me?" and offers to help in return. Then the rescuer, already knowing, glances down at the elf now trapped in his grip. With a decisive grip, he yanks her into his arms. Right then, she looks him in the eye and declares he's her fated person. She locks onto him at once, eyes flicking over that jaw-dropping chest, and she can't stop thinking. His arms are insanely thick and rock-hard, maybe even bigger and more solid than she'd ever want. Still clenched in his grip, she asks if he's really her fated one, terrified that if she keeps thinking, he'll let go and leave her behind. She knows he's wrestling a nightmare, but begs him to take her somewhere safe first. He carefully sets her down on her feet, and she can't believe it. Those hands are unexpectedly gentle, so she's left thinking, wow, he's a real gentleman. She thanks her destined one, then dares him with a big promise. If he really smashes the nightmare for her, she'll press her chest to his and murmur love straight into his ear. Clashing steel and savage roars ricochet through the trees, and she can't stop wondering if that horrifying scream is coming from the nightmare itself. Because if her fated person really faces something like that, can they actually stand toe-to-toe? From her hiding place, she watches a colossal monster clash with her even bigger rescuer, right there, pure chaos. Then it hits her. His power isn't just strength and manners, there's this magnetic charm, stronger than anything the Sword Saint has ever shown. Her eyes go wide, her heart flips, and she makes her choice. Starting now, he's not just her savior, he's her husband. From afar, a reptilian beast watches the chaos like it's studying a masterpiece, wondering between its cold thoughts. If this gentleman is worth ignoring because the armored fighter's brawling style is pure monster energy. Meanwhile, Arcel's excitement erupts like a firecracker. She's done watching from the sidelines, and she's about to properly see her future husband. With a sharp yank, she starts ripping off the blindfold, and when her eyes open, her pupils shine with heart-shaped sparkles. Right as Uno gets hammered non-stop by the octopus monster's tentacles, her decision hits like a spark in the dark. Those massive limbs slam into his armored body over and over, splashing thick, dark fluid with every brutal crash. When Arcel sees the sheer brutality unfold, her expression locks up in shock, eyes blazing with razor-sharp focus. Her mouth drops open in a silent gasp, and her eyes lock onto the brutal spectacle like she can't look away. Now the blindfold's finally off, her uncovered eyes drink in everything. Blurred or not, the full weight of the scene hits her all at once. A heartbeat later, her voice turns calm and controlled as she apologizes and begs you to wipe her earlier declaration clean.